When a 30-year-old CEO drops to one knee in front of her entire board of directors, you know something extraordinary just happened. But this isn't where our story begins. It starts with a maintenance worker in gray coveralls, a man everyone ignored, fixing a problem that billion-dollar engineers couldn't solve. A single father who walked away from fortune to raise his daughter. A woman so powerful she terrified Wall Street, brought to her knees by the quietest man in the building. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The fluorescent lights in Orion Grid Technologies' basement flickered at 6:47 a.m., casting uneven shadows across Mason Reed's workbench. He'd been there since 5:30, same as every Tuesday, running diagnostics on the HVAC system that nobody else wanted to touch. The machine hummed beneath his calloused hands, a sound most people would find monotonous, but Mason heard the irregularities. The slight wheeze in Sector 3. The grinding that shouldn't exist in a properly maintained compressor. His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor. Ellie ate all her breakfast, made her lunch. She's asking about the science project. Mason smiled, thumbs moving quickly. Tell her we'll work on it tonight. Volcano's going to be epic. He pocketed the phone and returned to the machinery. This was his life now. Simple, contained, exactly how he needed it to be. Reed! The voice echoed down the stairwell before the man appeared. Frank Morrison, facilities supervisor, built like a retired linebacker with a personality to match. Got an emergency. 3rd floor, conference room C. Vice presidents are losing their minds. Mason wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better days. What's the problem? Hell if I know. Something about the presentation system. They've got some big meeting in 40 minutes. Frank's expression carried the particular exhaustion of someone who'd been yelled at by people making 20 times his salary. Jenkins already looked at it. Couldn't figure it out. Jenkins is good with the basic stuff, Mason said, grabbing his toolkit. Must be something deeper. Yeah, well, they're threatening to postpone the whole meeting. Apparently that's impossible or the world ends or whatever. Frank headed back upstairs. Try not to make eye contact. These 3rd floor types treat us like we're invisible anyway. Mason followed, taking the stairs 2 at a time despite the heavy toolkit. Invisible suited him just fine. Invisible meant nobody asked questions. Nobody dug into his background. Nobody wondered why a maintenance worker could afford the apartment he lived in, or why he sometimes corrected engineers in the elevator before catching himself. The 3rd floor was a different world. Marble floors instead of concrete. Art on the walls that probably cost more than his truck. Women in sharp blazers clicked past on heels that echoed with purpose. Men in suits worth 4 figures checked phones that cost more than Mason's monthly salary. Nobody looked at him. Conference room C was chaos contained behind glass walls. Mason could see them before he entered. 6 people in expensive clothes, gesturing at a blank projection screen like it had personally offended them. A woman with silver hair paced while talking rapidly into her phone. A younger guy in a vest kept jabbing at a remote control like violence might solve the problem. Mason knocked once, then entered. Finally, the silver-haired woman said without looking at him. The screen won't display. We've tried 3 different laptops, 2 cables, rebooting the system. Nothing works. I'll take a look, Mason said quietly. He set his toolkit down and moved to the control panel. The room continued buzzing around him. Phone calls, complaints, someone ordering a backup conference room, just in case these maintenance people can't handle basic technology. Mason ignored it all. He'd developed that skill years ago, the ability to tune out everything except the problem in front of him. The control panel looked fine at first glance. He checked the obvious things: power, connections, input sources. All normal. Then he noticed something the others had missed. A tiny indicator light that should have been green was amber. He traced the cable backward, following it through the wall panel. Had to move a decorative plant and pull out the access panel. Behind it, someone had incorrectly routed the fiber optic cable, creating a bend radius too sharp for proper signal transmission. Found it, Mason said. The room quieted slightly. The fiber's kinked, he explained, carefully straightening the cable. Probably happened during the renovation last month. Just needs proper routing. He secured the cable correctly, replaced the panel, moved the plant back. The whole repair took 4 minutes. The screen flickered to life, displaying the laptop's desktop perfectly. "Oh, thank God," someone said. The silver-haired woman ended her phone call. "That's it? It was just a bent cable?" "Yes, ma'am." Mason gathered his tools. "We had Jenkins up here for 30 minutes. Geet." "Easy to miss if you don't pull the panel," Mason said diplomatically. Jenkins was a decent guy. No point throwing him under the bus. "Well, thank you." She'd already turned back to her team. "Okay, people, we've got 32 minutes. Let's run through the presentation once." Mason left as invisibly as he'd arrived. Back in the basement, Frank was eating a sandwich at his desk. "They happy?" "Fixed it." Mason signed the work order. "Bent fiber optic." "Course it was." Frank took another bite. "You heading out at 3 today?" 3:15. Ellie's got early dismissal." "That kid's lucky to have you, Reed. Not many single dads put in the effort you do." Mason didn't respond. Effort wasn't the right word. Ellie wasn't something he made an effort for. She was the reason he breathed, the reason he'd walked away from everything else, the reason he showed up every day to a job that used maybe 5% of his actual capabilities. 7 years ago, when cancer took his wife, Sarah, Mason had been a different person. Ambitious, driven, building something that mattered. But Sarah's death had reordered every priority in his life with brutal clarity. None of it mattered if Ellie grew up without a parent who was actually present, who knew her favorite color, who made pancakes on Saturdays and helped with homework, and remembered that she couldn't sleep without the dolphin nightlight. So he'd made choices that confused everyone who knew him, turned down opportunities that others would kill for. Simplified his life until it fit entirely in the hours between dropping Ellie at school and picking her up again. Most people thought he'd given up, failed somehow. Mason knew different. He'd just reprioritized. His phone buzzed again. This time it was the school. Reminder, science fair projects due Friday. Parent volunteers needed for setup Thursday evening. He typed back immediately. "I'll be there Thursday. What time?" The response came quickly. 6 p.m. "Thank you, Mr. Reed." Mason glanced at the clock. 7 hours until pickup. He had 3 more maintenance requests to handle, a quarterly inspection report to file, and a mysterious grinding noise in the executive elevator that nobody else could diagnose. He got to work. Scarlett Vale's office occupied the entire northeast corner of the 43rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a view of the city that most people only saw in magazines. The furniture was Italian. The art was original. Everything in the space communicated power, success, and the subtle intimidation that came from being the youngest CEO in Orion Grid's history. At 30 years old, Scarlett had accomplished more than most people did in entire careers. She'd taken a struggling tech company and transformed it into a billion-dollar enterprise. Wall Street analysts called her ruthless. Business magazines put her on covers with headlines like "The Ice Queen of Tech" and "No Mercy All Results." She preferred effective. Right now, effective meant dealing with the electrical problem that had been plaguing her office for 3 days. "So you're telling me," she said slowly, looking at the 2 engineers standing in front of her desk, "that you still don't know what's causing the power fluctuations?" The older engineer, Richard something she couldn't remember, shifted uncomfortably. "The issue is intermittent, Ms. Vale. We've run diagnostics, checked the circuits, examined the building's main systems, and we can't identify the source. I've had my computer crash twice. The lights flicker. Yesterday, the entire office went dark for 20 seconds. Scarlett's voice remained calm, which somehow made it worse. "This is the executive floor of a technology company. We can't have unreliable power." "We understand, Ms. Vale. We're doing everything Clearly not everything, or it would be fixed." She glanced at her assistant, Marcus, who stood by the door with his tablet. "Who else can look at this?" Marcus checked his screen. "Facilities has a few senior technicians. There's also Reed." "Reed?" "Maintenance worker. Handles a lot of the complex repairs. Frank Morrison speaks highly of him." The younger engineer made a face. "You mean the maintenance guy?" "Ms. Vale, this is clearly an advanced electrical issue. We need someone with proper engineering credentials, not some handyman." Scarlett studied the engineer. He was maybe 26, fresh out of some prestigious program, probably making 6 figures, and convinced he was the smartest person in every room. She'd been that person once, before reality taught her that credentials and intelligence weren't always the same thing. "Send up Reed," she said to Marcus. "Ms. Vale, the younger engineer started. You've had 3 days. He gets 1 hour. She returned her attention to her computer screen, the universal signal that the conversation was over. Dismissed. They left, the younger one muttering something under his breath. Scarlett didn't care. She had a board meeting in 2 days and a presentation that couldn't afford technical difficulties. If this Reed person could fix it, his title was irrelevant. Her phone rang. The board chairman. Scarlett, we need to discuss the quarterly projections. She pulled up the relevant files, slipping into the conversation with the ease of someone who'd been negotiating since she could talk. Numbers, strategies, market positions. This was her native language. The place where everything made sense because everything had clear parameters. Unlike people. People were complicated, emotional, unpredictable. They wanted things that didn't align with optimal outcomes. They made decisions based on feelings instead of data. Scarlett had learned early that keeping distance made everything simpler. A knock interrupted her call 20 minutes later. Hold on, she said into the phone, then raised her voice. Come in. The man who entered didn't look like the engineers who'd just left. No pressed shirt or designer glasses. Just gray coveralls, work boots, and a toolkit that had clearly seen years of use. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed a trim, and hands that showed actual work. He also looked tired. Not sleepy. The deeper kind of tired that came from carrying weight most people couldn't see. Mason Reed, ma'am, you requested maintenance. His voice was quiet but clear, respectful without being servile. I'll call you back, Scarlett said into the phone, ending the conversation. She stood, gesturing to her office. Power fluctuations? 3 days? 2 engineers couldn't solve it. Mason nodded, already scanning the room with the kind of attention that suggested he was cataloging everything. When does it happen? Any pattern? Intermittent, sometimes morning, sometimes afternoon. No warning. Okay. He set down his toolkit and pulled out a device she didn't recognize. I'm going to check the circuits and the local junction box. It may take a few minutes. Take whatever you need. Scarlett returned to her desk, opening her laptop to review the documents for the board meeting. She was aware of Mason moving around her office, testing outlets, examining the lighting fixtures. At one point pulling a small panel off the wall to access something behind it. He worked quietly, efficiently, no wasted movement. After about 15 minutes, he spoke. Ms. Vale, do you use that lamp? He pointed to a decorative floor lamp in the corner. Occasionally. Why? The wiring's deteriorating, probably been there since the building was constructed, 15, 20 years. Insulation's breaking down, causing shorts that cascade through your office's circuit. He was already disconnecting it. Surprised it hasn't tripped the breaker. The engineers didn't check that. Most people don't think to check decorative fixtures. They look at the main systems first. He examined the lamp's cord, showing her the frayed section near the base. See here? This is your culprit. Scarlett stood, moving closer. The damage was obvious once you knew to look for it. I can replace the wiring, or we can just remove the lamp entirely, Mason continued. Your choice. Remove it. I never use it anyway. Yes, ma'am. He worked quickly, disconnecting the lamp properly and sealing off the outlet. Then he ran his testing device again, checking readings on the small screen. That should do it, he said after a moment. Your power should be stable now, but I'd recommend having facilities do a full survey of the decorative fixtures on this floor. If one's deteriorating, others might be too. I'll have Marcus arrange it. Scarlett watched him pack up his tools with the same efficiency he'd shown throughout. Reed, what's your background? He paused, just for a fraction of a second. Maintenance, mostly. Been with Orion Grid about 3 years. Before that? Different work, nothing relevant. His tone was polite but final. The conversational equivalent of a closed door. Scarlett recognized the deflection. She used similar techniques herself when people asked questions she didn't want to answer. Well, you solved in 20 minutes what 2 engineers couldn't manage in 3 days. I'll make sure Morrison knows. Just doing my job, Ms. Vale. He headed for the door, toolkit in hand. Reed? He turned back. Scarlett hesitated, which was unusual for her. Thank you. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but a slight softening. You're welcome. Then he was gone, and Scarlett was alone in her office again, looking at the empty space where the lamp had been. She pulled up her computer and sent Marcus a quick message. Get me Mason Reed's employment file. The response came within minutes, a PDF attachment. Scarlett opened it. The file was surprisingly thin. Reed, Mason J., age 32, hired 3 years ago as a maintenance technician. Previous employment listed simply as private sector engineering. No specifics. References from Frank Morrison and 2 other facilities supervisors, all glowing. Education. Bachelor's in Electrical Engineering from MIT. Master's in Systems Architecture from Stanford. Scarlett read that line 3 times. A maintenance worker with degrees from MIT and Stanford, working for $52,000 a year when he could easily command 10 times that. She pulled up the company directory and cross-referenced his name with any other mentions in the system, found a few work orders, some safety inspection reports he'd filed, and 1 note in the HR system. Emergency contact, Eleanor Reed, daughter. Currently listed with neighbor Chen, Margaret. A daughter. Single father, based on the emergency contact setup. Scarlett closed the files and returned to her board meeting preparation. Reed's background was unusual, but Orion Grid employed thousands of people. Everyone had their reasons for their choices. Still, she found herself glancing at the empty space where the lamp had been, thinking about the quiet man in gray coveralls who'd solved a problem everyone else had missed. 3 days later, Mason was replacing filters in the air handling system on the 27th floor when his radio crackled. "Reed, you copy." Frank's voice slightly distorted. Mason keyed the mic. "Yeah, I'm here. Need you in the data center, priority 1. That was never good. "What's wrong?" "Cooling system's acting weird. Temperature's climbing. Jenkins and Patterson are already down there, but they're not making progress." "On my way." Mason gathered his tools quickly. The data center was the heart of Orion Grid's operations. Thousands of servers processing millions of transactions every hour. If the cooling system failed, those servers would overheat, data would be lost, systems would crash. He designed most of those systems years ago, before his life had changed. The data center occupied 2 full floors in the building's core, surrounded by security that rivaled some military installations. Mason badged through 3 separate checkpoints, each guard recognizing him and waving him through without question. Inside, the noise was tremendous. Thousands of cooling fans, the hum of processors, the whoosh of air circulation. Temperature displays on the wall showed readings climbing into yellow zones. Jenkins and Patterson stood by the main cooling controls, both looking stressed. "Thank God," Patterson said when he saw Mason. "The secondary cooling loop isn't circulating properly. We've checked the pumps, the valves, everything we can think of." Mason moved to the control panel, studying the readouts. Temperature climbing steadily. Flow rates abnormal in loop 2. Pressure differentials off by significant margins. "Did you check the heat exchanger?" he asked. "First thing, it's clean. Filters?" "Replaced yesterday." Mason walked the length of the cooling system, one hand trailing along the pipes, feeling for temperature variations. The metal told stories if you knew how to listen. Here, too hot. There, too cold. Circulation pattern wrong. He stopped at a junction point where 3 pipes met, crouching down to examine the valves. Found what he was looking for. A pressure relief valve stuck in a partially open position. Subtle enough that casual inspection would miss it, but significant enough to disrupt the entire circulation pattern. "Here," he said, pointing. "Valve seized, probably mineral buildup. It's bleeding pressure from the system." Patterson leaned in. "Son of a bitch, we walked right past that. Easy to miss." Mason was already pulling tools from his kit. "I need to isolate this section. Can you reroute flow to loop 3 temporarily?" "On it." Mason worked quickly, but carefully. The valve had to be removed and cleaned without damaging the surrounding components. One wrong move and he could crack a seal, causing a leak that would shut down the entire data center. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it, buzzed again, and again. "You need to get that?" Jenkins asked. "I'm good." Mason kept working. Ellie knew not to call unless it was urgent, and Mrs. Chen would handle any minor problems. The valve came free after 10 minutes of careful work. Mason examined it. Mineral deposits had built up inside, preventing proper closure. He cleaned it thoroughly, checked the seal, and reinstalled it with new gaskets. "Try it now," he said to Patterson. Patterson opened the valve slowly. Flow resumed. The pressure reading stabilized. Temperature displays began dropping back toward green zones. "That's it," Patterson said, relief obvious in his voice. "Temperature's dropping. System's balanced." Mason stood, wiping his hands. His phone buzzed again. This time he checked it. 4 missed calls from Mrs. Chen. 1 voicemail. His stomach dropped. He stepped away from the noise, pressing the phone to his ear to hear the message. "Mason, it's Margaret. Ellie's fine, but she had a fall at school. Nothing serious, but they want a parent to come get her. She's asking for you. Call me back." Mason checked the time. 2:47 p.m. School ended at 3:15, but early dismissal meant Ellie was supposed to be home already. "Jenkins, Patterson, can you monitor the system for the next hour? Make sure temperatures stay stable?" "Sure thing. It should be fine now." "Thanks." Mason was already moving toward the exit. He keyed his radio while walking. "Frank, Reed here. I've got a family emergency. Need to leave early." "The cooling system. Fixed. Jenkins and Patterson can monitor. I'll file the report tomorrow." "Everything okay?" "Daughter had an accident at school. I need to go." "Go. We've got it covered." Mason took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator, emerging into the lobby and crossing to the parking garage at a pace just short of running. His truck, an aging Ford that he maintained himself, started immediately. The drive to Mrs. Chen's apartment took 12 minutes. Normally, Mason drove with careful patience, but today he might have pushed a few yellow lights. Mrs. Chen answered the door before he knocked, concern on her weathered face. "She's okay, Mason. Just shaken up." Ellie sat on Mrs. Chen's couch, holding an ice pack to her knee. When she saw Mason, her face crumpled and tears started. "Hey, sweetheart." Mason crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside her. "What happened?" "I fell off the monkey bars." Her voice was small, wobbly. "It really hurts, Dad." "Can I see?" She moved the ice pack. The knee was swollen and already showing an impressive bruise. "That's a good one," Mason said gently, examining it carefully. "Can you bend it?" She tried, wincing but managing some movement. "Okay, let's get you home and elevated. Mrs. Chen, thank you for calling me." "Of course. The school nurse said it's not broken, just a bad bruise, but they wanted you to monitor it." Mason scooped Ellie up carefully, ice pack and all. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder. "I was being careful," she said, muffled. "I promise." "I know, baby. Accidents happen." He carried her to the truck, settling her in the passenger seat with the ice pack repositioned. The drive home took 5 minutes. Their apartment was on the 4th floor of a modest building, nothing fancy but clean and safe and exactly what they needed. Inside, Mason set Ellie on the couch and propped her leg up with pillows. "You hungry?" "A little." "How about grilled cheese and tomato soup?" "Can we do shapes with the cookie cutters?" "Star-shaped grilled cheese coming right up." He made the food while keeping an eye on her through the kitchen pass-through. She'd turned on a nature documentary, something about deep-sea creatures. Ellie loved anything involving animals or science. The grilled cheese came out perfectly, golden brown stars that made her smile despite the pain. Mason sat beside her on the couch, making sure she ate slowly. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I'm sorry you had to leave work." He looked at her, this 7-year-old girl who apologized for needing her father. "Ellie, you never have to apologize for that. You're more important than any job. You understand me?" She nodded, but he could see the thought still bothering her. "Listen to me. When you were born, your mom and I made a promise that we would always, always put you first. That's not negotiable. That's not something you have to earn or feel bad about. That's just how it is, okay?" "Okay." She took another bite of sandwich. "The deep sea is really weird, Dad. There's fish with lights on their heads." "Anglerfish. They use the light to hunt in the dark." "That's so cool." They spent the rest of the afternoon on the couch, ice pack refreshed every 20 minutes, watching documentaries and working on homework. Ellie's math worksheet had some tricky word problems, but Mason talked her through them patiently. "If Sarah has 12 cookies and gives away 3 to each of her 4 friends, how many cookies does she have left?" Ellie read aloud. "Okay, so what do we know?" "She starts with 12. "Right, and what does she do with them?" "Gives 3 to each friend. She has 4 friends." "So how many total cookies does she give away?" Ellie worked it out on her fingers. 12. 3 times 4 is 12. Perfect. So if she started with 12 and gave away 12, she has 0. Ellie wrote down the answer. That's kind of sad. Sarah should have kept some cookies. Mason laughed. Yeah, she should have. His phone buzzed. A message from Frank. Data center stable, good work today. Take tomorrow off if you need it for Ellie. Mason typed back. Thanks, she'll be okay. See you tomorrow. Another message came through, this one from an unknown number. Mr. Reed, this is Marcus Chen, assistant to Ms. Vale. She would like to schedule a meeting with you at your earliest convenience. Please reply with your availability. Mason stared at the message. A meeting with the CEO. That couldn't be good. Or maybe it was nothing. Maybe she wanted to thank him for fixing her office. Maybe, Dad, you're frowning at your phone, Ellie said. Just work stuff. Is it important? Nothing more important than being here with you. He set the phone aside and returned his attention to the homework, to the ice pack timer, to the small, perfect world contained in this apartment with his daughter. Whatever Scarlet Vale wanted, it could wait until tomorrow. Scarlett's office at 7 p.m. was quiet, in a way it never was during business hours. No assistants, no interruptions, just the hum of the building systems and the view of the city lights spreading out below. She'd sent Marcus home an hour ago, stayed late to review the quarterly reports without distraction. But instead of numbers, she kept thinking about Mason Reed. After he'd fixed her office, she'd started noticing him around the building. Or rather, she'd started noticing how she'd never noticed him before. The maintenance worker who moved through Orion Grid like a ghost, visible only when something broke. She'd observed him fixing an executive's office door, watched him explain a wiring issue to a confused facilities manager with a patience that suggested teaching came naturally. Saw him in the parking garage at exactly 3:30 every day, leaving in a beat-up truck while everyone else stayed until 7 or 8. Then today she'd learned about the data center crisis, the cooling system that could have crashed half the company's operations, fixed by the same quiet man in gray coveralls. Scarlett pulled up his employee file again. Still sparse. Still raising questions. MIT, Stanford, working maintenance. The pieces didn't fit. She made a decision, typing quickly. Marcus, schedule Mason Reed for a meeting tomorrow. My office, 10 a.m. Make it clear it's not optional. Then she closed her laptop, grabbed her coat, and headed home to her empty penthouse apartment where everything was expensive and nothing was comfortable. The thought followed her all the way there. What makes someone walk away from everything they've earned? And somewhere across the city, Mason Reed was falling asleep on his couch after Ellie finally drifted off, her injured knee properly elevated, her dolphin nightlight casting gentle shadows on the wall. He didn't dream about corner offices or quarterly reports. He dreamed about a little girl laughing as they built a volcano for the science fair, baking soda and vinegar ready to erupt in a spectacular mess that would make all the other parents nervous and all the kids jealous. That was success. That was everything. The rest was just noise. Mason arrived at Orion Grid the next morning at his usual time, 5:30, but instead of heading to the basement, he stopped at the security desk. The night guard, Ramon, looked up from his coffee. Morning, Reed. You're on the list for the executive floor. 10 a.m. with Ms. Vale. Yeah, I got the message. Mason signed in. Any idea what it's about? Ramon shrugged. Above my pay grade, man. But she doesn't usually call maintenance workers up there unless something's broken. Great. Mason spent the next 4 hours working through his normal routine, trying not to think about the meeting. He fixed a malfunctioning card reader on the 6th floor, replaced 3 burned-out ballasts in the cafeteria, and listened to Frank complain about budget cuts while pretending to care. At 9:40, he headed to the locker room and changed into the cleanest work shirt he owned. Still coveralls, still work boots, but at least there weren't any grease stains. Frank caught him on the way out. Where you headed looking almost presentable? Meeting with Vale. The CEO. What'd you do? Fixed her office last week. Maybe she wants to say thanks in person. Mason didn't believe that, and neither did Frank based on his expression. Or maybe she wants to offer you something. Frank leaned against the doorframe. Reed, I know you keep your head down, but people notice. You're better than this job. You know that, right? Mason grabbed his jacket. This job works for me. Because of Ellie. Because of Ellie. Frank nodded slowly. Just keep an open mind, okay? Sometimes good things happen. I'll see you after. The elevator ride to the 43rd floor felt longer than usual. Mason watched the numbers climb, each one taking him further from the comfortable obscurity of the basement. When the doors opened, he stepped into a world of polished surfaces and hushed conversations. Marcus Chen stood waiting by the reception desk, tablet in hand. "Mr. Reed, right on time. Miss Vale is ready for you." "Lead the way." They walked past offices with nameplates that read like a Fortune 500 directory. Vice presidents, senior directors, people who made decisions that affected thousands of employees. Through the glass walls, Mason could see them in meetings, on phone calls, staring at screens with the intense focus of people who measured success in quarterly increments. He'd been one of them once. Before. Marcus stopped at the corner office. "Ms. Vale, Mr. Reed is here." "Send him in." Mason entered, and the door closed behind him with a soft click that felt unnervingly final. Scarlett Vale stood by the windows, silhouetted against the morning light. She turned as he entered, and Mason got his first real look at her outside of the brief encounter last week. Younger than he'd expected for a CEO. Sharp eyes that cataloged everything. Expensive suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. But there was something else there, too. A tiredness around her eyes that expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. "Mr. Reed, thank you for coming." "You didn't really give me a choice, Miss Vale." A flicker of amusement crossed her face. "No, I suppose I didn't. Please, sit." Mason took one of the chairs facing her desk. She sat opposite him, not behind the desk, but in the other chair, which felt deliberate, like she was trying to minimize the power dynamic. It didn't work. The entire office screamed power, but he appreciated the attempt. "I'll be direct," she said. "I've been reviewing your work over the past few weeks. The office repair, the data center cooling system, your maintenance record in general. You solve problems that stump engineers with advanced degrees. You work efficiently and thoroughly, and according to every supervisor I spoke with, you're the best technician this company has." Mason waited. There was more coming. "Your employee file shows degrees from MIT and Stanford, systems architecture. You could be running an engineering department somewhere, making 6 figures minimum. Instead, you're fixing air conditioning units for $52,000 a year." She leaned forward slightly. "Why?" "Personal reasons." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I'm giving." They looked at each other for a long moment. Mason had spent years perfecting the art of deflection. He wouldn't be pushed into explanations he didn't want to give. Scarlett changed tactics. "I have a position opening, senior systems engineer reporting directly to the CTO. 200,000 base salary, full benefits, stock options. You'd be leading the infrastructure modernization project we're planning for next quarter." Mason felt something twist in his chest. 200,000, the kind of money that could change Ellie's life. Better schools, college fund that wouldn't require loans, security he couldn't provide on a maintenance salary. "I appreciate the offer," he said carefully, "but I have to decline." Scarlett's eyebrows rose. "You're not even going to think about it?" "I don't need to. The answer's no." "May I ask why?" "The hours wouldn't work for me. We offer flexible scheduling." "Ms. Vale, with respect, I know what senior engineering positions require. 60, 70-hour weeks. Late nights when systems crash, weekend deployments, emergency calls at 2 in the morning. Mason kept his voice even. "I have a daughter. I pick her up from school at 3:15 every day. I make her dinner, help with homework, put her to bed. I don't miss those things for work. Not anymore." Something shifted in Scarlett's expression. "Anymore?" Mason realized his mistake immediately. "I just mean that's my priority now." "You said anymore, implying you used to miss those things." She studied him with new intensity. "Who are you, Mason Reed?" "A maintenance worker trying to be a good father." "Bullshit." The word came out sharp, and Scarlett didn't apologize for it. "I've built my career on reading people, on seeing what they're hiding. You're hiding something significant." Mason stood. "If there's nothing else, I should get back to work." "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Despite everything, despite his own stubborn need for privacy, Mason found himself sitting. There was something in her voice, not anger, but something else. Desperation, maybe. Or loneliness. Scarlett stood and moved to the windows, her back to him. "I became CEO at 28. You know what everyone said? That I was too young, too female, too aggressive. They waited for me to fail. She turned, and her expression was unguarded in a way that seemed to cost her something. I proved them wrong by working harder than everyone else. Longer hours, more dedication. I sacrificed everything, relationships, friendships, any semblance of a personal life, because that's what it takes. That's what you think it takes, Mason said quietly. And you think differently? I think success means different things to different people. Then what does it mean to you? Mason hesitated. Ellie's face flashed through his mind. The way she laughed when they built pillow forts. How she fell asleep during movies, her head heavy on his shoulder. The concentration on her face when she drew pictures of dolphins and space stations and impossible machines. Being there, he said finally, that's success to me. Being present for the person who needs me most. Scarlett returned to her chair, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the city hummed with its endless noise. Inside this office, suspended 43 floors above it all, there was only silence. I envy that, Scarlett said, so quietly he almost missed it. What? Having something that matters more than all this. She gestured vaguely at the office, the windows, the empire she'd built. I've spent my entire adult life climbing. Sometimes I wonder what I'm climbing toward. Mason didn't know what to say to that. This woman who terrified board members and commanded boardrooms, sitting there looking lost. Ms. Vale? Scarlett. If we're being honest, you can call me Scarlett. Scarlett? The name felt strange. You called me here to offer me a job. I've declined. Is there anything else? She looked at him for a long moment. Do you regret it? Walking away from whatever you walked away from? No. Not even a little? Not even a little. Scarlett nodded slowly. Then you're either lying to yourself or you've figured out something the rest of us haven't. Maybe both. Mason stood again, and this time she didn't stop him. Thank you for the opportunity. I hope you find someone good for the position. He was almost to the door when she spoke again. Mason? He turned. Your daughter's lucky to have you. Something in her voice made him pause. Thank you. What's her name? Ellie. Tell Ellie I hope her knee feels better. Mason's hand froze on the door handle. How did you know about her knee? Scarlett's expression flickered, surprise, then something like embarrassment. Marcus mentioned it when he called you yesterday. Said you'd left early for a family emergency. It was a reasonable explanation, probably even true, but Mason had the distinct impression she knew more than she was saying. He left without responding, and the elevator ride down felt like decompression. Back to the basement, back to his locker, back to the familiar world where he understood the rules. Frank was waiting. Well? Job offer. Turned it down. Course you did. Frank didn't sound surprised. She take it okay? Hard to tell with her. Reed, you know people talk, right? About you. Mason grabbed his toolkit. People always talk. They say you're wasting potential, that you're hiding from something. Some folks think you screwed up somewhere and this is all you can get. And what do you think? Frank considered the question. I think you're the smartest guy in this building and you're exactly where you want to be. I just don't understand why. You don't have to. Mason spent the rest of the day fixing things. A jammed door on the 19th floor, faulty wiring in the second floor break room, the executive elevator that had been making concerning noises for a week. He lost himself in the work, in problems with clear solutions, in a world that made sense. At 3:15 exactly, he clocked out and drove to Ellie's school. She was waiting by the front entrance, backpack nearly as big as she was, her injured knee wrapped in a colorful bandage she'd clearly decorated herself. Her face lit up when she saw the truck. Dad, look, I drew a shark on my bandage. That's a great shark. Mason helped her into the passenger seat. How was school? Good. We learned about metamorphic rocks, and I got 100 on my spelling test, and Jacob threw up during lunch, but it was because he ate too much, not because he was sick, so we didn't have to evacuate. Sounds like quite a day. Oh, and Mrs. Patterson said the science fair is definitely Friday, and we should practice our presentations. Can we practice tonight? Absolutely. They drove home, Ellie narrating every detail of her day with the enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could maintain. Mason listened, asking questions, laughing at the right moments. This was the world he'd chosen, this exact world. Their apartment felt warm when they entered. Mason had left the heat on low, and the November chill hadn't penetrated. Ellie dropped her backpack and immediately started pulling out the science fair volcano they'd been working on. Okay, so I'm supposed to explain the chemical reaction, right? Right. What happens when you mix baking soda and vinegar? The acid in the vinegar reacts with the base in the baking soda and creates carbon dioxide gas, which makes the eruption. She recited it perfectly, then grinned. Did I say it right? Perfect. Want to practice the actual eruption? Yes. They moved the volcano to the kitchen sink. Mason had learned that lesson the hard way last week when practice eruption number 1 had reached the living room ceiling. Ellie carefully measured the baking soda, her tongue poking out in concentration. Mason stood behind her, ready to help if needed, but letting her do it herself. Ready? She asked. Ready. She poured the vinegar, and the volcano erupted in a satisfying fountain of foam. Ellie squealed with delight, clapping her hands. It works, Dad! It really works! You did great, sweetheart. His phone buzzed. He ignored it, buzzed again. Ellie looked up. You can check it if you need to. I'm good. Let's practice your presentation speech. But the phone kept buzzing. Finally, reluctantly, Mason pulled it out. 3 messages from an unknown number. This is Scarlett Vale. I got your number from HR. I apologize for the intrusion. I wanted to say I was out of line this morning. Your privacy is your own. Also, I meant what I said about Ellie, and I hope you both enjoy the science fair. Mason stared at the messages. The CEO of Orion Grid Technologies, texting him personally, apologizing, mentioning his daughter by name. Dad? Who is it? Just work. Is it important? He looked at Ellie, covered in baking soda, beaming with pride over her volcano. No, baby. Nothing's more important than this. He put the phone away without responding. But that night, after Ellie fell asleep, Mason sat on the couch and read the messages again. There was something in them, a vulnerability he hadn't expected. Scarlett Vale, the Ice Queen of Tech, apologizing for overstepping. Against his better judgment, he typed a response. No apology necessary. And thank you. She worked really hard on the project. The reply came within seconds. What's the project? Volcano. Classic, but effective. I did a solar system model in 4th grade. Saturn's rings fell off during the presentation. Mason found himself smiling. Ellie would be devastated. She's been rehearsing for a week. She sounds wonderful. She is. There was a pause, then another message. Can I ask you something? And you can tell me it's none of my business. Go ahead. Why did you really turn down the job? The real reason. Mason's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He could deflect. Should deflect. But something about the late hour and the darkness of his living room made him honest. Because I already failed at balancing work and family once. I'm not doing it again. The response took longer this time. Failed how? My wife got sick. Cancer. I was so focused on work, building something I thought mattered, that I missed the signs. By the time we caught it, it was too late. She died, and I wasn't there for most of it. Too busy in meetings, on calls, solving problems that didn't matter. Mason, I'm so sorry. After she died, I looked at my daughter and realized she'd lost her mother. She couldn't lose her father, too. Not to work, not to ambition. So I walked away from all of it. That's not failure, that's love. Mason set the phone down, something tight in his chest. He hadn't talked about Sarah in years, hadn't explained his choices to anyone. And here he was, spilling it to a woman he barely knew, through text messages at 11 p.m. The phone buzzed one more time. Thank you for telling me. Your secret's safe. And for what it's worth, I think Ellie's the luckiest kid in the world. Mason didn't respond. He turned off the phone and sat in the darkness, listening to the quiet sounds of his daughter sleeping in the next room. The next morning, he arrived at work to find Frank looking worried. Reed, we got a problem. What kind of problem? Jenkins didn't show up. Patterson's out sick, and we've got inspections on 3 floors today. Building code stuff can't be postponed. I need you to cover all of it. Mason checked his watch. I can do the morning inspections, but I need to leave by 2:30 today. Science fair setup. Reed, this is mandatory. Inspections don't get postponed for my daughter's science fair. Mason's voice was calm but firm. I'll get the inspections done. All of them. But I'm leaving at 2:30. Frank looked like he wanted to argue, then sighed. Fine, but if you can't finish, I'll finish. And he did. Mason moved through the building like a machine, checking electrical panels, testing fire suppression systems, documenting everything with the kind of efficiency that came from years of experience. By 2 p.m., he'd completed inspections that should have taken 3 people all day. He was filing the last report when his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Reed, this is Principal Sanderson from Ellie's school. His stomach dropped. Is she okay? She's fine, physically, but there's been an incident. Can you come in? I'm on my way. Mason didn't bother telling Frank. He just left, taking the stairs 3 at a time to the parking garage. The drive to the school took 10 minutes that felt like an hour. Mason's mind ran through every possibility. Another injury, a fight, sickness. Each scenario worse than the last. Principal Sanderson met him at the office. Mr. Reed, thank you for coming so quickly. What happened? Let's talk in my office. Inside, Ellie sat in a chair looking small and miserable. When she saw Mason, tears started immediately. Hey, sweetheart. Mason knelt beside her. What's going on? I didn't mean to, she sobbed. I was just trying to help. Principal Sanderson settled behind her desk. Ellie was caught sharing answers on a math test with another student. Mason's world tilted slightly. Sharing answers. I wasn't cheating, Ellie said desperately. Emma didn't understand the problems and she was crying, Dad. She was so upset. I was just trying to help her. Ellie, I understand you wanted to help, Principal Sanderson said gently. But during a test, that's not allowed. We've talked about this in class. But she was crying. Mason put a hand on Ellie's shoulder. Can you give us a minute? Of course. Ellie and Mason stepped into the hallway. He crouched down to her level. Baby, I know you wanted to help Emma. She's my friend. I couldn't just let her be sad. I understand, but there's a difference between helping someone learn and giving them answers during a test. Do you see that? Ellie's lip trembled. I guess, but it feels the same. I know it does, but one helps them understand. The other just helps them pass. And which one actually helps Emma more in the long run? The understanding one, Ellie admitted quietly. Right. So maybe next time Emma needs help, you can study together before the test. Okay? Okay. She wiped her eyes. Am I in trouble? With the school, probably. With me, Mason pulled her into a hug. I'm disappointed you broke a rule, but I'm proud you wanted to help your friend. We'll figure out the right way to do both. They returned to the office. Principal Sanderson gave Ellie a warning and a note about academic integrity to take home. No suspension, but a mark on her record. In the truck, Ellie was quiet. You okay? Mason asked. I'm really sorry, Dad. I know. Are you mad? No, but we're going to talk about better ways to help your friends, okay? Okay. They drove in silence for a minute, then Ellie spoke again. Dad, can I still do the science fair? Of course. This doesn't change that. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. That evening, they arrived at the school gym where the science fair was being set up. Tables lined the walls, kids and parents arranging projects with varying degrees of organization. Ellie carried her volcano carefully, Mason following with the supplies. They found their assigned table and began setting up. Ellie arranged everything precisely. The volcano centered, the explanation poster positioned just right, the baking soda and vinegar bottles within easy reach. How's this look? She asked. Perfect. Mason was helping her adjust the poster when someone spoke behind him. Impressive volcano. He turned to find Scarlett Vale standing there, looking completely out of place in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater among the chaos of elementary school parents. Ms. Vale. Mason recovered quickly. What are you doing here? I volunteer for STEM education programs. The school invited me to be one of the judges tomorrow. Her eyes moved to Ellie. You must be Ellie. Ellie looked between Scarlett and Mason, confused. Hi. This is Ms. Vale, Mason said. She works at my company. Oh, Ellie brightened. Do you want to see my volcano? I'd love to. And Mason watched, slightly stunned, as his daughter launched into her presentation, the same one she'd practiced a dozen times at home. Scarlett listened with genuine attention, asking questions that Ellie answered with growing confidence. The carbon dioxide gas creates pressure, Ellie explained, which forces the foam out of the top, like a real volcano, except real ones use magma, not baking soda. And the chemical reaction is exothermic, right? Scarlett asked. Ellie paused. What's exothermic? It means it releases heat. Most acid-base reactions do. Oh, I didn't know that part. Ellie looked at Mason. Dad, is that true? It is. Good question, Ms. Vale. Scarlett smiled, and it transformed her face completely. Not the polished CEO smile, but something genuine. Call me Scarlett. And Ellie, this is really wonderful work. You should be proud. Thank you, Ellie beamed. Then, with the complete lack of filter only children possess, she asked, Are you my dad's boss? Not exactly. I run the company, but your dad doesn't report directly to me. Oh, he talks about you sometimes. Mason felt heat creep up his neck. Ellie, he said, You're very smart and a little scary. Scarlett laughed, a real laugh that made other parents turn to look. He's not wrong about either of those things. Okay, that's enough, Mason said, gently steering Ellie back toward the volcano. We should finish setting up. Scarlett lingered. I'll see you both tomorrow. Good luck, Ellie. After she left, Ellie whispered, Dad, she's really pretty. Focus on your volcano. But that night, lying in bed after Ellie fell asleep, Mason couldn't stop thinking about Scarlett standing in that gym, asking his daughter about chemical reactions, about the way she'd looked, younger, softer, like someone who'd forgotten how to pretend for a few minutes. His phone buzzed. Your daughter is delightful, and you were right. She worked really hard. Thank you for not mentioning the test incident. What test incident? Mason smiled in the darkness. Exactly. See you tomorrow, Judge. See you tomorrow, Volcano Dad. He set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Something was shifting, something he hadn't planned for and wasn't sure he wanted. But for the first time in 7 years, Mason Reed felt the faint pull of something beyond the careful boundaries he'd built around his life. It terrified him. The science fair judging began at 9 a.m. sharp, and Mason arrived with Ellie 30 minutes early. She'd barely slept, waking him up twice during the night to practice her presentation one more time. Now she stood beside her volcano wearing her favorite dress, the blue one with stars that Sarah had bought her 2 birthdays before she died, fidgeting with the edge of the poster board. Dad, what if I forget what to say? You won't. You've practiced 100 times. What if the volcano doesn't erupt? We tested it last night. It worked perfectly. What if... Ellie. Mason knelt down, straightening the collar of her dress. You know this stuff inside and out. Just talk about what you love about it. The rest will follow. She took a shaky breath. Okay. Other kids were arriving now, parents in tow. Everyone carrying projects that ranged from professional-looking displays to last-minute poster boards held together with hope and tape. Mason recognized some of the parents from school pickups, tired faces, coffee cups, the universal expression of people who'd stayed up too late, hot-gluing foam balls to represent planetary orbits. At 8:50, the judges entered. 3 of them, a retired chemistry teacher, someone from the local university, and Scarlett Vale. She looked different again. Not the CEO in the power suit, not the casual volunteer from yesterday. Today she wore slacks and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. Professional, but approachable. She caught Mason's eye across the gym and offered a small smile before turning her attention to the first project. She's one of the judges? Ellie whispered. Apparently. Is that weird? A little bit, yeah. They watched the judges move from table to table, spending about 5 minutes with each student. Some kids were confident, rattling off facts with the ease of natural performers. Others stumbled through explanations while parents hovered anxiously nearby. Ellie grabbed Mason's hand. I'm nervous. That's okay. Nervous means you care. What if I mess up? Then you mess up. It's not the end of the world. But he could feel her hand trembling in his, and something in his chest tightened. This mattered to her. This small moment in an elementary school gym mattered more than anything he'd built at Orion Grid, more than any system he'd designed or problem he'd solved. The judges reached the table next to theirs, an elaborate display about water purification that probably had significant parental involvement. The kid, a boy named Derek, who Ellie had mentioned before, delivered his presentation flawlessly. His mother beamed from the sidelines. Then the judges moved to Ellie's table. The retired teacher smiled warmly. "Hello there, what's your name?" "Eleanor Reed, but everyone calls me Ellie." Her voice was small but steady. "And what did you make, Ellie?" "A volcano, to demonstrate chemical reactions between acids and bases." "Wonderful, can you tell us about it?" Ellie launched into her presentation, and Mason watched her transform. The nervousness didn't disappear. He could see it in the way she twisted her fingers together, but she pushed through it, explained the materials, described the reaction, even mentioned the exothermic property that Scarlett had taught her yesterday. "And now I'll demonstrate," Ellie said, reaching for the baking soda. Her hand shook slightly as she poured it into the volcano. Mason held his breath. Then came the vinegar, and the foam erupted exactly as it should, flowing down the sides in a satisfying cascade. Ellie's face lit up with relief and pride. "Excellent work," the university professor said, making notes. "Very well explained." The retired teacher nodded. "You clearly understand the chemistry. Good job." Then Scarlett spoke. "Ellie, can I ask you a question?" "Sure." "You mentioned this is an acid-base reaction. Can you think of other places where we see similar reactions in everyday life?" Ellie paused, thinking. Mason knew she hadn't prepared for follow-up questions. He watched her process, saw the moment she made the connection. "Like when you use baking soda to clean stuff? My dad does that sometimes. He says it reacts with the dirty things and makes them easier to wipe away." "Exactly right. That's a perfect real-world application." Scarlett made a note on her judging sheet, and something passed between her and Mason, a look that lasted only a second but felt significant. "Thank you, Ellie. This was really impressive." After the judges moved on, Ellie practically vibrated with excitement. "Dad, I did it! I didn't forget anything. You were perfect. Did you see how big the eruption was? And I remembered the exothermic thing. I'm proud of you, sweetheart." They had to wait another hour while the judges evaluated all the projects. Mason bought Ellie a donut from the PTA table, and they sat on the bleachers watching other kids present. Some were brilliant, some were disasters. All of them were 7-year-olds doing their best, which made every single one worth something. Finally, the principal took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming to our annual science fair. Our judges had a very difficult time choosing winners, but they've made their decisions. We'll start with honorable mentions." Ellie gripped Mason's hand. 3 names were called, not Ellie's. Third place goes to Derek Morrison for his water purification system. Derek and his mother went up to collect a bronze ribbon. The mother looked disappointed that it wasn't first place. Second place goes to Sarah Chen for her investigation of plant growth under different light conditions. Sarah practically skipped to the front. Her parents cheered. And first place goes to... Ellie's grip tightened. Christopher James for his working model of the solar system with accurate orbital mechanics. Ellie's hand went slack in Mason's. Her face fell, trying to hide disappointment behind a brave smile. "It's okay, baby," Mason said quietly. "You did amazing." "I know." But her voice was thick. "Can we go?" "Awards aren't over. Let's stay." "Dad, please." He saw it then, the tears threatening, the way her chin trembled. She didn't want to cry in front of her classmates. "Okay, let's go." They made it to the truck before Ellie broke down. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet crying that somehow hurt worse. "I worked so hard," she said through tears. "I practiced so much." Mason pulled her into a hug. "I know you did." "It's not fair. Derek's mom probably did half his project." "Maybe, but that's not about you. You did your own work. You understood everything. That matters more than a ribbon." "Then why does it hurt?" "Because you cared. And that's good, Ellie. Caring about things is good, even when it hurts." She cried against his shoulder for a few more minutes while Mason rubbed her back and wished he could fix this the way he fixed electrical systems. Just identify the problem, replace the broken part, make it work again. But people didn't work that way, especially 7-year-olds with big feelings and bigger hearts. His phone buzzed. He ignored it, buzzed again. "You can check," Ellie mumbled. He pulled it out. 2 messages from Scarlett. "Is Ellie okay? I saw you leave. For what it's worth, she deserved a place." The other judges disagreed. Mason stared at the messages. then typed back with one hand while still holding Ellie. "She'll be fine. Thanks for checking." "I'm sorry. I know disappointment doesn't teach what we think it does." "No, but she'll learn from it anyway. She's lucky to have you." Mason pocketed the phone. "Hey, you know what we haven't done in a while?" Ellie pulled back, wiping her eyes. "What?" "Ice cream for breakfast. It's not breakfast time. It's almost lunch. Ice cream for lunch then. And then maybe we go to the bookstore. Get you that book about deep-sea creatures you wanted." A small smile. "Really? Really? Sometimes when things don't go the way we hoped, we get to do something unexpected instead." "Okay." She buckled her seatbelt. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I'm still sad, even with ice cream." "That's allowed. You can be sad and eat ice cream. They're not mutually exclusive." "What does mutually exclusive mean?" "It means you can feel two things at once." They went for ice cream. Then the bookstore, where Ellie spent 45 minutes choosing between 3 different marine biology books before settling on one with a giant squid on the cover. By the time they got home, she was calmer. The disappointment settled into something manageable. That evening, after Ellie fell asleep with her new book, Mason sat on the couch and finally let himself think about the science fair, about how much he'd wanted her to win, about the unfairness of 7-year-olds competing with projects that had clear parental engineering. His phone rang. Scarlett. He answered without thinking. "Hello? I hope I'm not calling too late." "It's fine. Ellie's asleep." "How is she?" "Disappointed. But okay." Mason leaned back against the couch. "Why are you calling, Scarlett?" "I wanted to explain about the judging. The other 2 judges thought Christopher's project showed more advanced understanding. I disagreed, but I was outvoted." "You don't have to explain." "Ellie didn't win. It happens. She worked harder than any other kid there. You could see it in how she presented. Hard work doesn't always equal winning. She's learning that now." There was a pause. "You're not angry?" "At what? The judges? The other kids? What would that accomplish?" "Most parents would be furious." "I'm not most parents." Mason rubbed his eyes. "Look, I appreciate you caring, but Ellie will be fine. She's resilient. She gets that from you. She gets it from her mother, actually. Sarah was the strongest person I ever knew." Another pause, longer this time. "Can I ask what happened to her?" "Cancer, ovarian. By the time we caught it, it had spread everywhere. She fought for 8 months, but..." Mason's voice caught slightly. "She didn't make it. I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry. Doesn't change anything." "No, but it means something anyway." Mason didn't respond. Outside his window, the city lights flickered against the night sky. "Mason, can I tell you something?" Scarlett's voice was quieter now. "Watching you with Ellie today, the way you comforted her, the way you put her needs first without even thinking about it, I realized I've never seen that before." "Seen what?" "Someone who knows exactly what matters." Plenty of people know what matters. Knowing and living it are different things. She seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "I know my career matters, my company matters. The shareholders, the employees, the quarterly reports, I know all of it matters. But when I'm 90 years old looking back, I don't think any of it will matter like Ellie matters to you." "Then maybe you're measuring the wrong things." "Maybe I am." They sat in silence, connected by a phone line and something neither of them quite understood. "I should go," Scarlett said finally. "I just wanted to check on her." "Scarlett?" "Yes?" "Thank you for caring about her. You didn't have to." "I wanted to." A pause. "Good night, Mason." "Good night." He set the phone down and sat in the darkness, wondering what exactly was happening. This wasn't supposed to be part of his life. Complicated feelings, late-night phone calls, a woman who made him think about things he'd buried 7 years ago. The next Monday at work, Frank pulled Mason aside before he could even put his toolkit down. "We got a situation." "What kind?" "The kind where corporate wants you specifically." Mason's stomach sank. "For what?" "Some VP's office has electrical issues. They requested you by name." Frank handed him a work order. 37th floor, office 3712. The 37th floor was senior management territory. Mason took the elevator up, wondering which executive had heard about his work, and decided to test him. Office 3712 belonged to Richard Chen, VP of Operations, a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expression that suggested he'd never been told no in his life. "You're Reed?" He looked Mason up and down with thinly veiled skepticism. "Yes, sir. I understand you have an electrical issue. My computer keeps shutting down. The IT department can't figure it out, so they sent you." The way he said "you" made it clear what he thought of maintenance workers. Mason set his toolkit down and examined the office. Expensive furniture, multiple monitors, enough electronics to power a small server room, all running off outlets that were probably original to the building. "When does it shut down?" "Randomly, middle of important work." "Do the lights flicker when it happens?" "Sometimes." "Why does that matter?" Mason ignored the condescension and checked the outlet setup. Found the problem immediately. Someone had daisy-chained power strips, creating a load that exceeded the circuit's capacity. Every time the system drew too much power, the breaker tripped. "Your circuit's overloaded," Mason explained. "You need either a dedicated line for your computer equipment or to redistribute the load across multiple circuits. Can't you just fix it?" "I can redistribute the current load, but it's a temporary solution. For a permanent fix, you'll need an electrician to install new circuits." Richard's face reddened. "I don't have time for construction. Just make it work." "Sir, I can make it work temporarily, but..." "Then do that. And do it quickly. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Mason spent the next 15 minutes reorganizing the power distribution, testing loads, making sure everything stayed under capacity. It would hold for now, but eventually the problem would return. "This should work short-term," he said, packing up. "But I strongly recommend, Yeah, permanent fix. I'll put in a request." Richard was already back at his computer, dismissing Mason without another glance. In the hallway, Mason encountered two other executives leaving a conference room. "Did you see the maintenance guy in Richard's office?" one said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Yeah, heard he's some kind of miracle worker." "Miracle worker? He's a maintenance tech. Probably couldn't handle real engineering if his life depended on it." They walked past Mason without recognizing him, still talking. "Still, must be nice. Easy job. No real responsibility. Clock in, fix some cables, clock out." Mason continued to the elevator, their words washing over him like rain. He'd heard it all before. The assumptions, the dismissals, the casual contempt that people who'd never held a wrench reserved for people who did. It used to bother him. Before Sarah died, when he still cared about perception and status and what people thought. Now it just seemed sad. These men in expensive suits, measuring worth in titles and salaries, completely missing what actually mattered. The elevator opened on the 43rd floor. Marcus was waiting. "Mr. Reed, Ms. Vale would like to see you if you have a moment." "Is something broken?" "No, she just asked if you could stop by." Mason hesitated. This wasn't protocol, but refusing a CEO's direct request seemed unwise. "Lead the way." Scarlett's office door was open. She stood by the windows, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing as she talked. When she saw Mason, she held up one finger. "Wait a minute. I understand your concerns, James, but the timeline is fixed. We need those deliverables by Q2, no exceptions." She listened, her jaw tightening. "Then hire more people. I don't care about budget constraints. You said you could deliver? Now deliver." Another pause. "Good. Update me Friday." She ended the call and turned to Mason. "Sorry, crisis management." "You wanted to see me?" "I did. Sit?" "I'd rather stand. I've got work." "This won't take long." She moved to her desk but didn't sit, instead leaning against it. "How's Ellie?" "Better. She won't be a marine biologist after all. Now she wants to study bioluminescence specifically." A smile flickered across Scarlett's face. "That's very specific." "She read about anglerfish. Now she's obsessed. Smart kid." "The smartest." Mason shifted his weight. "Is that why you called me up here, to ask about Ellie?" "Partially." Scarlett picked up a folder from her desk. "I also wanted to show you this." She handed it to him. Inside were design specifications for Orion Grid's infrastructure modernization project, the one she'd mentioned during her job offer. Mason scanned the documents, and his engineer's brain automatically started identifying problems. "Your load balancing is going to fail here," he said, pointing to a diagram. "And this redundancy setup won't work with your existing architecture." "I know." The teams have been stuck on it for weeks. Why are you showing me this? Because I need help, and you're the only person I trust to give me honest answers without ulterior motives. Mason closed the folder. Scarlett, I'm not an engineer anymore. But you were. A good one, based on these credentials. She tapped the folder. And you still think like one. I saw it in your face just now. You spotted the problems immediately. Spotting problems and solving them are different things. So help me solve them. Consultant basis, your own hours, work from wherever you want. I'll pay you market rate. And when exactly would I do this work? Between picking up Ellie from school and making dinner? Evenings? Weekends? Whenever it fits your schedule. Scarlett's voice carried a note of desperation that didn't match her usual control. Mason, this project is critical to the company's future. If we fail, thousands of jobs are at risk. I need someone who can think beyond the obvious solutions. Hire someone. There are plenty of qualified engineers. I've hired 6 of them. They all miss what you just spotted in 30 seconds. Mason set the folder on her desk. I walked away from this work for a reason. I know, and I'm not asking you to come back to it full time. Just help me fix this one thing, please. The please did it. Scarlett Vale, who commanded boardrooms and terrified executives, saying please like she actually needed him. Let me think about it. That's all I'm asking. Mason left her office feeling unsettled. The elevator ride down gave him too much time to think about the problems he'd seen in those designs, about how his brain had immediately started solving them, about the part of himself he'd deliberately shut down 7 years ago, suddenly waking up. That evening, he picked up Ellie from school and tried to focus on her stories about recess drama and library books. But part of his mind kept returning to those infrastructure diagrams, to the elegant solutions that would fix the load balancing issues, to the satisfaction of solving complex problems. He hated that part of himself. The part that still craved the work. The part that whispered he could do both. Be a good father and a good engineer. That's what he'd thought before. And Sarah had died while he was in meetings. After Ellie went to bed, Mason pulled out his laptop and did something he hadn't done in years. He sketched out a solution to Orion Grid's load balancing problem. Just to see if he still could. Just to prove to himself that walking away hadn't meant forgetting. The solution came easily, flowing from his fingers like it had never stopped. Better architecture, cleaner redundancy, more efficient resource allocation. He could see the whole system in his mind, could trace every connection and pathway. It took him 45 minutes to diagram the complete solution. He stared at it for a long time, this evidence that part of him still existed. Then he closed the laptop without saving it. This wasn't his life anymore. He'd chosen differently. But 2 days later, when another critical system at Orion Grid crashed, and Frank called him in a panic at midnight, Mason found himself driving to the building with his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with anxiety. The operations center was chaos when he arrived. Engineers crowded around monitors showing red alerts across multiple systems. Someone was yelling about data loss. Someone else was on the phone with vendors. Frank spotted Mason and rushed over. Thank God, the whole financial processing system is down. We're losing transactions by the second. Where's the senior engineering team? Here, they can't figure it out. Mason pushed through the crowd to the main console. The head engineer, a woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, looked up with exhausted relief. Reed, please tell me you can do something. He scanned the error logs and the problem became clear immediately. A cascading failure in the database cluster, triggered by the exact load balancing issue he'd spotted in Scarlett's plans. I need admin access, he said. You're not authorized. Then get someone who can authorize me. Now. Dr. Kim looked at Frank, who nodded. 30 seconds later, Mason had full system access. His hands moved across the keyboard with muscle memory he thought he'd lost. Command lines, system queries, diagnostic tools. Around him, the room went quiet as engineers watched the maintenance worker navigate their systems with the fluency of someone who'd built them. Because he had built them. Not this exact configuration, but the underlying architecture. Years ago, before everything changed, within 10 minutes, he'd identified the corruption point. Within 20, he'd isolated it. Within 40, he'd rerouted critical processes and restored service. The error alert stopped. The system stabilized. Transactions resumed processing. Someone started clapping. Then others joined. Mason barely heard it. He stood from the console, suddenly aware that everyone was staring at him. Dr. Kim's expression had shifted from exhaustion to something like awe. "How did you—" she started, then stopped. "Who are you?" "Just maintenance," Mason said. He left before anyone could ask more questions, taking the stairs down because he couldn't face the elevator. His heart was racing. His hands were shaking. Not from stress, from the rush. The pure adrenaline of solving an impossible problem, of making broken things work again. He'd forgotten how good it felt. His phone rang before he reached his truck. "Scarlett, I just got a call from operations. They said you saved the entire financial system." "I did my job." "Mason, that wasn't your job. That was senior engineering work, expert-level troubleshooting that my entire team couldn't manage." "Is there a point to this call?" "Yes." She paused. "Who are you, really? And don't give me the maintenance worker answer. I need the truth." Mason leaned against his truck, staring up at the Orion Grid building with its thousands of lit windows. "I used to be someone else, someone who built systems like the one I just fixed. Then my wife died, and that person didn't matter anymore. But he's still in there. Doesn't mean I want him back. What if you could have both? What if—" "There is no both, Scarlett. I tried that. It destroyed everything that mattered." His voice came out harsher than intended. "You wanted the truth? Here it is. I was one of the original architects of Orion Grid's core systems. I helped build half the infrastructure this company runs on. Then I walked away because I finally figured out that none of it meant anything without my family." Silence on the other end of the line. "You built—" Scarlett's voice was barely a whisper. "Mason, are you telling me you're—" "I'm the guy who picks his daughter up from school at 3:15. That's who I am now. That's who I choose to be." He unlocked his truck. "Good night, Scarlett." He hung up before she could respond. The drive home took 15 minutes. Long enough for the adrenaline to fade. Long enough for him to realize he'd just revealed everything he'd spent 7 years hiding. Long enough to wonder if he'd just made a terrible mistake. Mason didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of Ellie breathing in the next room, replaying the phone conversation with Scarlett over and over. By dawn, he'd convinced himself that showing up to work would be walking into an ambush. HR would be waiting. Security would escort him out. Someone would have dug into his past and found everything he'd spent 7 years burying. Instead, when he arrived at 5:30, Frank was the only one there, eating a bagel at his desk. "Morning, Reed. Hell of a thing last night." "Yeah." "Operations is still talking about it. Dr. Kim wants to buy you dinner." Frank took another bite. "Of course, she also wants to know how a maintenance guy learned to code like that." "I took some classes." "Uh-huh." Frank didn't believe him, but he also didn't push. "Well, whatever you did, corporate's happy. Saved them about $3 million in lost transactions." Mason changed into his coveralls without responding. He had a full day of work orders, routine stuff that wouldn't require thinking. That's what he needed. Mindless repairs, distance from last night's mistakes. He made it until 10 a.m. before Marcus appeared in the basement. "Mr. Reed, Miss Vale would like to see you." "I'm busy." She said it's urgent. Frank looked between them. "Go on, Reed. I'll cover your tickets." Mason followed Marcus to the elevator, his jaw tight. The ride-up was silent. Marcus kept glancing at him like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. "She's not angry," Marcus finally offered. "If that's what you're worried about." "I'm not worried." "Right." Scarlett's office door was closed. Marcus knocked once. "Come in." Inside, Scarlett stood by the windows again, apparently her default position for difficult conversations. But she wasn't on the phone this time. She was just standing there, looking out at the city, her arms wrapped around herself in a gesture that seemed uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Thank you, Marcus. Close the door, please." The click of the door seemed too loud. Scarlett turned to face him. She looked tired, really tired, the kind that makeup couldn't hide. "I spent all night going through old company records. Do you want to know what I found?" Mason said nothing. The original incorporation documents for Orion Grid list 3 founders: James Chen, who's now retired in Florida; Patricia Holbrook, who sold her shares and moved to Europe 8 years ago. She moved to her desk and picked up a folder. And M. Reed, systems architect, the person who built the core infrastructure that this entire company runs on. The person who owned 30% of the company before selling most of it 7 years ago for a fraction of what it was worth. I needed liquid assets for medical bills. Your wife. Yes. Scarlett opened the folder, scanning a document. You retained 5%. Do you know what 5% of Orion Grid is worth now? I don't check. $47 million. She looked up. You're worth $47 million, Mason. And you're working maintenance for $52,000 a year. The money's in a trust for Ellie. I don't touch it. Why not? Because I didn't earn it by being her father. I earned it by ignoring my wife while she was dying. His voice was flat. That money can pay for Ellie's college, her future, whatever she needs. But I won't use it to make my life easier. That's not why I have it. Scarlett set the folder down slowly. You're punishing yourself. I'm choosing differently. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Mason moved closer to the desk. You wanted to know who I really am? I'm the guy who was so focused on building something important that I missed my wife's symptoms for months. I'm the guy who kept working while she did chemo because someone had to finalize the contracts. I'm the guy who wasn't there when she died because I was in a meeting in San Francisco that couldn't be rescheduled. His hands clenched. So yeah, I walked away from all of this. And yeah, I took a job that uses maybe 5% of my education. Because at least now when Ellie needs me, I'm there. Every single time. No meetings, no contracts, no excuses. Scarlett's expression had shifted to something Mason couldn't read. How old was Ellie when Sarah died? 6 months. 6 months? Scarlett's voice was barely audible. She doesn't remember her mother at all. No, just stories I tell her, pictures. The blue dress she wore to the science fair. That was Sarah's last gift to her. Mason felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Ellie asks sometimes what her mom was like, and I tell her Sarah was strong and funny and brilliant, that she loved books and terrible puns and the color green, but Ellie doesn't remember any of it, and that's my fault. That's not a... It is, Mason cut her off. If I'd paid attention, we would have caught it earlier. Maybe she'd still be alive. Maybe Ellie would have more than just stories. The silence stretched between them. Outside the windows, the city moved on, oblivious to the small tragedy being laid bare on the 43rd floor. I need to get back to work, Mason said finally. Wait, Scarlett moved around the desk. Mason, I'm not going to tell anyone. Your secret's safe. Why? Because you asked me to the night you told me about Sarah. You trusted me with something real, and I'm not going to betray that. What about the board, corporate? They're going to find out eventually. Not for me. She hesitated. But Mason, you can't hide forever. Someone else will dig into the records. Someone will make the connection. Then I'll deal with it when it happens. Or you could deal with it now, on your terms. Scarlett picked up another folder, a different one. I have a proposal. I already turned down your job offer. This is different. Hear me out. She opened the folder, pulling out several documents. The board wants to do a complete company history for the 40th anniversary next year. Recognition of the founders, the early days, how we got here. Your name would come up regardless. Mason's stomach sank. So this was inevitable. Yes. But if you work with me, we control the narrative. We tell the story the right way. You came back after personal tragedy. You've been quietly working here, staying connected to something you built. It's actually a good story, Mason, better than the alternative. What alternative? The one where someone else finds out first and turns it into gossip. Secret founder discovered working as janitor. They'd make it seem pathetic instead of what it actually is. And what is it actually? Scarlett looked at him directly. A man who knows what matters. Mason wanted to argue, but she wasn't wrong. Better to control the revelation than have it control him. What exactly are you proposing? Limited consulting role. We announce you're returning in an advisory capacity. No required hours, no office, work from home when you can. The board gets their founder back for PR purposes. You get to maintain your boundaries. Everyone wins. Except I don't want any of this. I know, but it's coming anyway. At least this way, Ellie doesn't find out from some news article or school gossip. That hit home. The thought of Ellie learning about his past from someone else, from kids at school whose parents read business sections. How much time would it actually require? Monthly board meetings? Maybe quarterly strategy sessions? The rest is up to you. Help if you want, ignore it if you don't. Scarlett pulled out a contract. I had legal draft something. Take it home, read it, think about it, no pressure. Mason took the contract. This feels like pressure. It's reality. I'm just trying to make reality less terrible. He left with the contract in his hand, his mind spinning. In the elevator, he read through the terms. Everything Scarlett had promised was there in writing. Minimal time commitment, work from home, explicit protection of his schedule for Ellie. The salary section made him blink. $250,000 annually for what amounted to showing up 12 times a year and occasionally answering emails. He was still reading when the elevator opened on the basement level. Frank took one look at his face. What happened? She offered me another job. And I don't know. Mason set his toolkit down. Frank, can I ask you something? Shoot. If you could make more money doing the same work you do now, would you? Hell yes. What kind of question is that? Even if it meant more responsibility? More visibility? Frank leaned back in his chair. Reed, I don't know what's going on with you and Vale, but here's what I know. You're the smartest guy I've ever worked with. You solve problems in minutes that take other people days. And you do it while making sure you're home for your kid. That's not something to hide from. That's something to be proud of. I'm not hiding. You sure about that? Mason didn't answer. He spent the rest of the day working through his tickets mechanically, his mind elsewhere. By the time he picked up Ellie from school, he'd read the contract 3 more times and was no closer to a decision. Dad, you're quiet, Ellie said from the passenger seat. Are you okay? Just thinking about work stuff. Is it bad work stuff? No, just complicated. Do you want to talk about it? Mason glanced at her, this 7-year-old who somehow knew when he needed space and when he needed to talk. Not yet, but thank you. That evening, after dinner and homework and the bedtime routine, Mason sat at the kitchen table with the contract spread in front of him. He pulled out his phone and did something he rarely allowed himself. He opened the photo album labeled Sarah. Her face smiled back at him from dozens of images. Sarah laughing at their wedding. Sarah pregnant with Ellie. Sarah holding their newborn daughter with exhausted joy. The photos stopped abruptly 8 months into Ellie's life. After that, there were only pictures of Ellie alone. Mason's finger hovered over one particular photo, Sarah in the hospital, thin and pale, holding Ellie and smiling despite everything. He'd taken that picture 3 days before she died. She'd made him promise something. Don't let this break you, she'd said, her voice weak. Don't let guilt eat you alive. I need you to be there for her. Really there. Not the ghost of a man hiding from his own life. At the time, Mason had thought he knew what she meant. Be present. Prioritize Ellie. Don't make the same mistakes. But looking at the contract now, he wondered if Sarah had meant something else too. Don't use me as an excuse to stop living. His phone buzzed. A text from Scarlett. No pressure, but the board meeting is next Tuesday. If you're going to do this, I need to know by Monday. Mason stared at the message, then at the contract, then at Sarah's photo. What would she tell him to do? The honest answer was, she'd tell him to stop asking what she would do and decide for himself. He picked up his phone and called Scarlett. She answered on the first ring. Mason, I'll do it, but I have conditions. Name them. First, nothing changes with my schedule. I'm still picking up Ellie at 3:15 every day. If a meeting runs late, I leave anyway. Agreed. Second, my primary job stays maintenance. This is consulting only. I don't want an office or a title change. The board will want, I don't care what the board wants. Those are my terms. A pause. Okay, what else? Third, Ellie comes first, always. If she needs me, I'm done. No explanations, no apologies. That's non-negotiable. I wouldn't expect anything less. Scarlett's voice was soft. Is that everything? One more thing. You stop trying to fix me. I'm not trying to fix you. Yes, you are. You think if you can just get me back into engineering, I'll realize I've been wasting my potential or whatever. But I'm not broken, Scarlett. I'm just different than I used to be. I know you're not broken. She sounded almost hurt. I think you're the least broken person I've ever met. I want you to have options. That's all. Mason softened slightly. Okay, then we have a deal. I'll have legal finalize everything tomorrow. Board meeting is Tuesday at 2. Can you make it? I'll be there until 2:45, then I leave. Understood. A pause. Mason, thank you for trusting me with this. Don't make me regret it. After he hung up, Mason sat with the weight of what he'd just agreed to. Part of him felt like he'd betrayed the promise he made 7 years ago. But another part, the part that sounded like Sarah's voice in his memory, felt like maybe this was okay. Maybe he could do both. He'd find out Tuesday. The weekend passed too quickly. Ellie wanted to go to the aquarium, so they spent Saturday looking at jellyfish and sea turtles while she chattered about bioluminescence and deep-sea pressure. On Sunday, they built a blanket fort in the living room and watched nature documentaries until Ellie fell asleep against his shoulder. Normal. Perfect. Everything that mattered. Monday morning, Frank called him into the office. Got some news. Corporate's moving you. Mason's blood went cold. What? Don't panic. It's a good thing they're creating a new position, technical liaison or something. You'd still do maintenance work, but also consult on bigger projects. Frank grinned. Comes with a huge raise, apparently. Someone upstairs really likes you. When does this start? Immediately. They want you at some board meeting tomorrow. Frank clapped him on the shoulder. Congrats, Reed. You deserve it. Mason spent Monday in a fog, going through motions, waiting for the other shoe to drop. When he picked up Ellie from school, she immediately noticed something was off. Dad, you're doing the worried face. What worried face? The one where your forehead gets all wrinkly and you forget to smile. He forced a smile. Better? No, that's the fake smile. What's wrong? I have a big meeting tomorrow at work. It's making me nervous. Why? Because things are going to change a little bit. Ellie's expression turned serious. Bad changes. No, baby, just different. I'm going to help with bigger problems at work sometimes. But nothing changes with us, okay? I'll still pick you up every day, still make dinner, still help with homework. Promise? Promise. She seemed satisfied with that. Mason wished he felt the same certainty. Tuesday arrived too fast. Mason put on the one dress shirt he owned, bought for Sarah's funeral, and worn maybe twice since. He paired it with his usual jeans because he wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. Ellie studied him at breakfast. You look fancy. I look uncomfortable. Why are you wearing that if you're uncomfortable? Sometimes we do uncomfortable things because they matter. Does this meeting matter? Mason thought about it. Yeah, I think it does. He dropped Ellie at school with an extra long hug, then drove to Orion Grid. The parking garage felt different somehow, or maybe he felt different. Marcus was waiting in the lobby. Mr. Reed, right on time. Ms. Vale is in the boardroom already. She wanted me to brief you first. Brief me on what? The board doesn't know you're coming. Ms. Vale thought the announcement would be more effective if you were just there. She ambushed me. Strategically presented you, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. The boardroom occupied the entire east side of the 43rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 30, and enough corporate art to fund a small country. Through the glass walls, Mason could see them already assembled, men and women in expensive suits, tablets out, coffee cups positioned precisely. Scarlett stood at the head of the table, mid-presentation. She saw Mason and Marcus approaching, and her eyes widened slightly. Surprise? Relief? Before she composed herself. Gentlemen, ladies, if I could have your attention for a moment, we have someone joining us today. The board members looked up with varying degrees of interest. Many of you know we've been planning our 40th anniversary celebration. Part of that involves recognizing our founders and the early innovations that built this company. Scarlett gestured toward the door. I'd like to introduce someone who's been with Orion Grid longer than most of you realize. Marcus opened the door. Mason stepped through. The room went silent. This is Mason Reed, Scarlett continued smoothly. Some of you may have encountered him around the building. What you don't know is that Mason is one of our original founders. He designed the core architecture that our entire infrastructure runs on. He's been working here for the past 3 years in facilities, staying close to the systems he built. And as of today, he's returning in a consulting capacity to help us modernize while maintaining the vision that made Orion Grid successful. A man at the far end of the table, Gerald Moss, board chairman, leaned forward. This is the maintenance worker who fixed the financial system crash last week? The same, Scarlett confirmed. You're telling me one of our founders has been working maintenance for 3 years and nobody noticed? He preferred it that way, Scarlett said before Mason could respond. And frankly, we're lucky to have had him here at all. His expertise has prevented countless system failures that we never even knew were threats. Another board member, a woman Mason didn't recognize, spoke up. Mr. Reed, why would you choose to work in such a limited capacity? Mason had been dreading this question. Everyone was looking at him now, waiting for an explanation that would make sense in their world of ambition and advancement. I have a 7-year-old daughter, he said simply. Working maintenance means I'm home for dinner every night. I pick her up from school. I help with homework. I don't miss her life for meetings or deadlines. That's worth more to me than any title. The room absorbed this. Some faces showed confusion. Others, particularly a few of the older board members, showed something like understanding. Gerald Moss nodded slowly. That's admirable, Mr. Reed, but surely you can understand our confusion. You're worth, he glanced at a paper in front of him, $47 million based on your retained equity. Yet you've been earning $52,000 a year? The equity is in trust for my daughter. I don't touch it. Why not? Personal reasons? Another board member jumped in. Richard Chen, the VP whose office Mason had fixed. His face had gone pale with recognition. Wait, you're the maintenance guy who fixed my power issues last week. I didn't realize that I knew what I was doing, Mason finished. Yeah, I got that impression. An uncomfortable ripple went through the room. Richard looked like he wanted to disappear. Scarlett cut in smoothly. The point is, we have an incredible resource that we've been underutilizing. Mason has agreed to consult on our infrastructure modernization project. He'll attend monthly board meetings and provide strategic guidance as needed. This is an opportunity to reconnect with our founding vision while moving forward. What's your time commitment, Mr. Reed? Gerald asked. Limited. I'll attend these meetings and help with specific technical issues, but my schedule is fixed. I leave at 2:45 every day to pick up my daughter. No exceptions. That's highly irregular. That's my requirement. Gerald studied him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. You know what? I respect that. My kids are grown now. I miss too many school plays and soccer games chasing the next promotion. If you figured out how to balance both, more power to you. The tension in the room eased slightly. All in favor of formalizing Mr. Reed's consulting position? Scarlett asked. Hands went up around the table. Not all of them. A few board members clearly had reservations, but enough. Motion carries. Welcome back, Mr. Reed. The meeting continued, but Mason barely tracked the conversation. Something about quarterly projections and market positioning. His mind was on Ellie, on the clock ticking toward 2:45, on the strangeness of sitting in this room after spending 3 years deliberately avoiding it. At 2:30, he stood up. The room went silent again. I need to leave, Mason said. My daughter gets out of school early today. Scarlett didn't miss a beat. Of course. Thank you for coming, Mason. We'll send you the meeting notes. He walked out while they were still staring. In the elevator, his hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, from the surreal nature of what had just happened. He just walked out of a board meeting for Orion Grid Technologies because it was Tuesday, and Tuesdays were early dismissal, and nobody had stopped him. Frank was waiting when Mason returned to change out of the dress shirt. So? How'd it go? Strange. They know everything now. And I'm apparently a consultant with board meeting privileges that I can walk out of whenever I want. Frank laughed. Only you, Reed. Only you could get away with that. Mason picked up Ellie at 2:45 exactly. She bounced into the truck, chattering about a butterfly they'd found on the playground. Did your meeting go okay? She asked when she paused for breath. Yeah, it went okay. Are you still worried? Not as much. Good. Can we have tacos for dinner? We can definitely have tacos. That evening, after Ellie was asleep, Mason's phone rang. Scarlett. Hey, he answered. You actually left. I told you I would. I know, but I didn't think... She paused. Gerald Moss called me after you left. He said you were either the bravest person he'd ever met or the craziest. What do you think? I think you're both. And I think you just changed how that entire board views work-life balance. 3 of them stayed after to tell me they wish they'd had the courage to set similar boundaries. Mason smiled despite himself. So I'm a revolutionary now? You're something. Her voice softened. Thank you for doing this. I know it wasn't easy. It's not over yet. Someone's going to leak this to the press. Then it gets complicated. Let me worry about that. You just keep being you. That's the plan. After they hung up, Mason sat in the darkness of his living room and let himself feel it. The weight lifting, the fear receding, the possibility that maybe he could do this. Be present for Ellie and still use the parts of himself he'd locked away. Maybe both was possible after all. The news broke 3 days later on a Thursday morning. Mason was replacing ceiling tiles on the 18th floor when Frank's voice crackled over the radio. Reed, you need to see this. See what? Just get down here. Mason found Frank in the break room, staring at his phone. Several other maintenance workers crowded around, all looking at the same article. Frank turned the screen toward Mason. The headline read, Tech billionaire hiding in plain sight. Orion Grid founder spent years working maintenance in his own company. Shit, Mason said. The article had everything. His history, his equity stake, Sarah's death, even a quote from an unnamed board member about his unconventional approach to work-life balance. Someone had leaked it all, probably whoever opposed his consulting position. Is this true? One of the guys asked. You're actually worth millions? It's complicated. Doesn't seem complicated. Says here you own 5% of the company. Frank shooed the others away. Give us a minute. When they were alone, he asked, You okay? Not really. Mason's phone was already lighting up with calls. Unknown numbers, probably reporters. This is going to be a circus. What are you going to do? Pick up Ellie from school at 3:15, same as always. But it wasn't the same. By lunch, news vans were parked outside the Orion Grid building. Mason watched from a window as reporters set up cameras, preparing for ambush interviews with anyone willing to talk. His phone rang. Scarlett. Where are you? 18th floor, watching the media circus. Come to my office. We need to talk. Scarlett, I have work. Mason, there are reporters calling everyone who's ever worked with you. Someone already tried to get into the facilities office looking for Frank. You need to get ahead of this. She was right. Mason took the service elevator to avoid the main lobby, slipping into Scarlett's office through the back entrance that executives used. Scarlett was pacing, phone pressed to her ear. I don't care what the optics are. We're not putting him on camera unless he wants to be. Yes, I understand the board's concerns. Tell them to call me directly. She hung up and turned to Mason. The board wants you to do a press conference. Absolutely not. I told them that. But Mason, this story isn't going away. Someone's going to write whatever narrative they want unless you control it. Let them write whatever they want. I don't care. What about Ellie? What happens when her classmates' parents see this? When other kids start treating her differently because her dad is secretly rich? That stopped him. He hadn't thought that far ahead. What do you suggest? One interview, controlled environment, vetted journalist. You tell your story on your terms, then it's done. And if I say no, then they keep digging. They camp outside your apartment. They follow Ellie to school. Scarlett's expression was pained. I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted, but it's happening. Mason looked out the window at the news vans. One interview. That's it. I'll set it up for tomorrow. Someone sympathetic, no gotcha questions. And today? Today you go out the back exit at 2:30. I'll have security make sure no one follows you. Mason made it to Ellie's school 10 minutes early, watching the entrance for any unfamiliar cars or cameras. When Ellie emerged, laughing with friends, oblivious to everything, something in his chest unclenched slightly. Dad, guess what happened at lunch? What happened? She launched into a story about someone's sandwich exploding in their backpack, and Mason let her words wash over him. This was what mattered, not headlines or board meetings or reporters. This moment, this child, this life they'd built together. That evening, after Ellie went to bed, Mason sat down to prepare for the interview. Scarlett had sent over likely questions. Most were predictable. Why did you hide your identity? How does it feel being worth millions while working for minimum wage? What message are you sending to other parents? One question made him pause. Do you regret your choices? Did he? He'd given up prestige, power, the satisfaction of building something massive. He'd spent 7 years fixing air conditioners and unclogging drains when he could have been shaping the future of technology. But he'd also been there when Ellie learned to ride a bike, when she lost her first tooth, when she cried over the science fair and laughed at dolphin videos and asked impossible questions about the universe. No, he didn't regret it. The interview was scheduled for Friday afternoon in a conference room Orion Grid had set up specifically for the purpose. The journalist was a woman named Rebecca Martinez, mid-40s, known for thoughtful human interest pieces. She shook Mason's hand with a grip that felt genuine. "Thank you for doing this, Mr. Reed. I know it's not easy. Let's just get it over with." They sat facing each other, cameras positioned to the side. Rebecca started with softballs, background questions, his education, how he came to co-found Orion Grid. Mason answered mechanically, waiting for the real questions. "You walked away from the company 7 years ago," Rebecca said. "Can you tell me why?" "My wife was diagnosed with cancer, terminal. I needed to focus on her and our daughter. And after she passed, I stayed focused on my daughter. She'd lost her mother. I wasn't going to let her lose her father too, even if he was physically present. So I chose a job that let me be actually present." "But why maintenance work specifically?" Mason considered his answer carefully. "Because it's honest work that ends when the day ends. I fix something, it's fixed. I go home. There's no taking it with me, no 3 a.m. emergencies, or at least very few. It gave me boundaries I couldn't maintain as an executive." Some people might say you wasted your potential. Some people measure potential differently than I do. I measure it in bedtime stories read and homework helped with and dinners eaten together. By that metric, I've maximized my potential perfectly. Rebecca smiled. "Your daughter doesn't know about your background, does she?" "She knows I used to do different work. She doesn't know the details." "Are you worried about how this will affect her?" "Terrified." The honesty surprised even Mason. "Ellie's just a kid. She shouldn't have to deal with other children treating her differently because of money she doesn't even have access to. But I can't control what other people do. I can only control how we handle it as a family." "What will you tell her?" "The truth. That her mom and I built something together. That after her mom died, I chose being her dad over everything else. That money doesn't change who we are or what matters." "Do you think other parents should make the same choice?" "I think every parent has to figure out what works for their family. This worked for mine. But I'm not here to judge people who make different choices. My wife was brilliant. She could have been CEO of any company she wanted. But she chose to be a mother first and a professional second. That was her choice, and it was valid. Whatever choice someone makes, as long as it comes from love, it's the right one." The interview continued for another 30 minutes. Questions about Orion Grid's future, about his consulting role, about whether he'd ever return full-time. Mason answered honestly. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew what his present required. When it was over, Rebecca shook his hand again. "This will run Sunday. I think people are going to relate to your story more than you expect." "I hope you're right." That evening, Mason sat Ellie down after dinner. "Baby, we need to talk about something." Her face immediately turned serious. "Am I in trouble?" "No, but something's going to change, and I want you to hear it from me first." He took a breath. "You know how I work at Orion Grid, fixing things?" "Yeah." "Well, a long time ago, before you were born, I helped start that company. I built a lot of the technology they use. Then Mommy got sick, and I stopped doing that work to take care of you." Ellie processed this. "So you used to be important." "I used to be different. Important is subjective." "What's subjective mean?" "It means different people think different things are important. Some people think running a company is important. I think making sure you're happy and safe is important." "Oh." She swung her legs from the chair. "Are you going to go back to the company work?" "A little bit. I'm going to help them with some problems. But nothing changes for us, okay? I'm still picking you up every day. Still making dinner. Still helping with homework." "Promise?" "Promise." "Okay." She seemed satisfied. Then, with characteristic 7-year-old randomness, "Can we have pancakes tomorrow?" "We can have pancakes tomorrow." The article ran Sunday morning. Mason's phone exploded with messages, some supportive, some critical, some just curious. He ignored most of them, focusing instead on making the pancakes he'd promised Ellie. Monday morning brought a different kind of attention. When Mason arrived at Orion Grid, employees stared. Some whispered. Others approached him directly. "Mr. Reed, I just wanted to say I think what you did is amazing," a young woman from accounting said. "My daughter's 3 and I miss so much because of work hours. Seeing that someone chose differently, it means something." Others were less kind. Richard Chen stopped him in the hallway. "You made us all look like fools. Walking around in coveralls, playing at being working class while sitting on millions." "I wasn't playing at anything. I was doing a job. A job you didn't need. You took that position from someone who actually needed the income." "I earned that income, same as everyone else here, by hiding who you really were." Mason felt his temper rising but kept his voice level. "Who I really am is a single father trying to raise his daughter right. Everything else is just details." He walked away before Richard could respond. Frank found him in the basement an hour later. "People are talking. Let them talk. Some of them aren't being kind. There's a petition going around demanding you either come back full-time as an executive or give up your equity." "A petition?" Mason laughed without humor. "What are they going to do, vote me out of my own company?" "Reed, this is serious. The board's divided. Half think you're a hero, half think you're a liability. Scarlett's been fighting to protect your position, but she can only do so much. I don't need her to protect me." "Maybe not, but she's doing it anyway." The second board meeting that month was called for Thursday, an emergency session to address the situation. Mason arrived at 2 p.m., already planning his exit at 2:45. The room was tense when he entered. Gerald Moss looked tired. Several board members wouldn't meet his eyes. Richard Chen sat with his arms crossed, radiating hostility. Scarlett stood at the head of the table, and Mason could see the strain in her posture. This had cost her something. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I've called this meeting to address concerns about Mason Reed's position with the company. I've heard your feedback, and I think we need to clear the air." "We need more than clearing the air," Richard interrupted. "We need to address the fact that he deceived everyone. How can we trust someone who spent 3 years lying about his identity?" "I never lied," Mason said quietly. "I just didn't advertise my past." "Same thing." "It's really not." Gerald raised a hand for silence. "Mr. Reed, help me understand. You're worth $47 million. You could be living anywhere, doing anything. Why stay here at all?" Mason stood moving to the windows. The city spread out below, vast and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Ellie was in class learning about fractions or state capitals or whatever third graders studied on Thursday afternoons. "My wife died in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and false hope," he said, not looking at them. "I was in San Francisco closing a deal when it happened. Someone called me, told me to come home, but by the time I got there, she was gone. She died alone because I thought a contract was more important than being there." The room was silent, so I made a choice. I walked away from all of this. He gestured at the boardroom, the building, the empire, because none of it brought her back. None of it meant anything compared to what I'd lost. And I had a 6-month-old daughter who needed a parent who was actually present, not just physically there, but mentally checked out from stress and deadlines and the endless race to build something that would outlast us. He turned back to face them. "I stayed at Orion Grid because I helped build it, and there was something satisfying about maintaining what I'd created. Working maintenance let me stay connected without getting consumed. It gave me boundaries. It gave me my life back. And yeah, I didn't advertise my history, because the minute people knew, they'd expect things from me I wasn't willing to give. They'd expect me to care about market share and stock prices and quarterly projections more than I cared about making it to my daughter's school play." "That. But you're sitting on equity worth millions," another board member said. "Money that could help people, that could fund research or charity, or it's in trust for my daughter, every penny. When she's old enough, she can decide what to do with it. Maybe she'll change the world. Maybe she'll buy a house and live quietly. Either way, it's her choice, not yours or mine." Richard leaned forward. "This is incredibly selfish. You had the chance to make a real difference, and you chose to fix air conditioners instead. I chose to raise my daughter. If you think that's selfish, then I'm not sure what to tell you." "Gentlemen, ladies," Scarlett interjected, This isn't about judging Mason's choices. This is about whether he can serve effectively as a consultant given the circumstances. And I believe he can. His technical expertise is unmatched. His understanding of our systems is irreplaceable. And his boundaries, she looked directly at Richard, are something we should respect, not criticize. The optics are terrible, someone muttered. The optics, Scarlett said firmly, are of a man who chose his child over his career. In a world where we talk endlessly about work-life balance but rarely practice it, that's actually revolutionary. And if this board punishes him for it, what message does that send to every other parent in this company? The silence that followed was different, contemplative. Gerald spoke first. Ms. Vale is right. We've lost good people because they couldn't balance work and family. Maybe instead of criticizing Mr. Reed, we should be asking what we can learn from him. He looked at Mason. Your consulting arrangement stands. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. A few heads nodded. Richard looked furious but said nothing. At 2:45, Mason stood. I need to leave. This time, no one seemed surprised. A few people even smiled. Outside, Mason found Scarlett waiting by the elevators. That was intense, she said. Thanks for defending me. I wasn't defending you. I was stating facts. She pushed the elevator button. Though, for the record, you didn't need defending. You handled Richard perfectly. He's not wrong, you know, about the money. I could be doing more with it. You're raising a good human being. That's doing more than most people ever accomplish. The elevator arrived. They rode down in silence. At the lobby, Scarlett touched his arm. Mason, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd made different choices? If you'd stayed in the executive track? Every day? And I wouldn't have been there when Ellie took her first steps, or said her first word, or figured out how to read. I wouldn't know her favorite color, or what makes her laugh, or how she likes her sandwiches cut diagonally because triangles are more sophisticated than rectangles. He met Scarlett's eyes. So yeah, I wonder, but I don't regret it. You're a better person than I am. I'm just a different person. You've built something amazing here, Scarlett. Don't diminish that. It feels empty sometimes. All this success, and I go home to an empty apartment and wonder what I'm doing it for. Mason didn't know what to say to that. The elevator doors opened on the parking garage level. I need to go, he said. Ellie's waiting. Of course. See you next month? See you next month. But as he drove to Ellie's school, Mason couldn't stop thinking about the loneliness in Scarlett's voice, the way she'd defended him to the board, fought for his right to choose differently, all while trapped in the life he'd escaped from. Ellie was waiting by the front entrance, backpack dragging on the ground. Dad, we got our permission slips for the museum trip. Can I go? When is it? Next Thursday. We're going to see dinosaurs. Then you're definitely going. Come on, let's get home. That evening, after homework and dinner and the nightly routine, Mason found himself thinking about Scarlett again, about the contrast between her successful, lonely life and his modest, full one, about the choices they'd both made and the prices they'd both paid. On impulse, he sent her a text. Do you have dinner plans tomorrow? The response came quickly. Are you asking me out? I'm asking if you want to have dinner with me and Ellie. She's making her famous spaghetti. Well, I'm making it, but she directs. A longer pause this time. I would love that. 6:30. I'll send you the address. Fair warning, it's not fancy. I don't need fancy. Good. Because you're getting 7-year-old conversation and pasta that may or may not be slightly overcooked. Sounds perfect. Mason set down his phone and wondered what he was doing. Inviting the CEO to dinner felt like crossing a line he'd carefully maintained for months. But something about her loneliness called to his own, the part of him that still grieved Sarah, that still woke up sometimes expecting to find her beside him. Ellie was skeptical when he told her the next day. Why is your boss coming to dinner? She's not exactly my boss, and because I invited her. Is she your friend? I think so. Yeah. Does she know about dinosaurs? I have no idea. Well, I'm going to tell her about dinosaurs. I'm sure she'll love that. Scarlett arrived at 6:30 exactly, carrying wine that definitely cost more than their weekly grocery budget, and looking uncomfortable in jeans and a simple sweater, probably the most casual outfit she owned. Ellie answered the door. Hi, I'm Ellie. Do you know about dinosaurs? Some? Not as much as you, I bet. I know a lot. Did you know that T-Rex probably had feathers? I did not know that. Come on, I'll tell you more. Mason watched his daughter drag Scarlett into the living room, launching into an enthusiastic lecture about theropods and the Cretaceous period. Scarlett listened with genuine attention, asking questions that made Ellie beam. Over dinner, spaghetti that was only slightly overcooked, they fell into easy conversation. Ellie dominated, talking about school and friends and the upcoming museum trip. Scarlett asked good questions, never condescending, treating Ellie like a person worth listening to. After Ellie went to bed, Mason and Scarlett sat on the small balcony with coffee, the city lights spreading out below them. "She's wonderful," Scarlett said. "You should be proud." "I am, every day. Thank you for inviting me. I can't remember the last time I had dinner that felt like family." "You don't have family?" "Parents passed away when I was in college. No siblings. I have cousins somewhere, but we don't talk." She sipped her coffee. "I poured everything into work. Told myself I'd make time for personal life later. And now it's later, and I don't know how." "It's not too late, isn't it? I'm 30 years old, and I've never had a relationship that lasted longer than 6 months. I don't have friends, just professional contacts. My entire life is Orion Grid, and watching you with Ellie, I realized I've been building the wrong thing." "You've built something important." "Important isn't the same as meaningful." She set down her cup. "Can I tell you something embarrassing?" "Sure. When I saw you that first day fixing my office, I thought you were attractive. But what really got me was how calm you were. How you just knew what mattered. Every decision I make involves analyzing 50 variables and predicting 18 outcomes. But you just fix things and go home to your daughter, and somehow that's enough." Mason didn't know what to say. "I'm not trying to make this weird," Scarlett continued quickly. I've spent months trying to figure out why I couldn't stop thinking about you. And I think it's because you have something I've been missing. Purpose beyond profit, connection beyond networking, a reason to wake up that has nothing to do with quarterly earnings. You could have that too. Could I? I'm the CEO of a billion-dollar company. I can't just walk away. You could choose differently, set boundaries, make space for the things that matter. Like you did. Like I had to. They sat in silence, the city humming below them. "Mason?" Scarlett's voice was quiet. "Do you think it's possible to fix something once you realize you've built it wrong?" "I think everything can be fixed. Sometimes you just have to be willing to take it apart and start over." She nodded slowly. Then, surprising both of them, she reached over and took his hand, just held it, her fingers cold against his palm. They stayed like that until her coffee went cold, and the city lights blurred into constellations neither of them could name. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Scarlett started leaving work at reasonable hours. She showed up for dinner on Fridays, at first by invitation, then just because. Ellie adored her, especially after Scarlett brought books about bioluminescence and helped build an elaborate ocean diorama for a school project. Mason watched it happen with a mixture of hope and terror. Hope because Scarlett was finding balance, discovering what life could look like beyond the office. Terror because he could feel himself falling for her, this brilliant woman who was learning to measure success in dinner conversations and homework help instead of stock prices. One Saturday in late November, they took Ellie to the aquarium. She raced from exhibit to exhibit, dragging them both along, narrating facts about every creature. "The giant Pacific octopus can squeeze through any opening larger than its beak," she announced. "And they're really smart. They can solve puzzles and remember people." "Smarter than some executives I know," Scarlett murmured to Mason. "Most executives, probably." They watched Ellie press her face against the glass, completely absorbed. Mason felt Scarlett's hand find his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Is this okay?" she asked quietly. "Yeah, this is okay." That evening, after Ellie fell asleep on the couch between them during a movie, Mason carried her to bed. When he returned, Scarlett was still there, looking uncertain. "I should probably go," she said. "You could stay. I didn't mean, I know what you meant," she smiled. "And I'd like that. Just talking, being here." They talked until midnight about everything and nothing. Sarah's memory didn't feel like a barrier. Scarlett asked about her, listened to stories, understood that love doesn't end just because someone dies. She sounds amazing, Scarlett said. I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you. Sarah always appreciated people who were honest about what they wanted. What do I want? I think you're still figuring that out. I know part of it. She looked at him directly. I want this. Whatever this is. You and Ellie and Friday dinners and aquarium trips. I want a life that matters more than a board meeting. Scarlett, I'm not asking for promises. I'm just telling you what I want, so you know. Mason pulled her closer, and they sat in comfortable silence until she fell asleep against his shoulder. He stayed still, not wanting to wake her, thinking about how life surprises you when you least expect it. The December board meeting arrived on a Tuesday that was unseasonably warm. Mason attended as required, but this time Scarlett sat beside him rather than at the head of the table. Gerald Moss called the meeting to order. Before we begin regular business, I have an announcement. Scarlett Vale has submitted her resignation as CEO, effective end of quarter. The room erupted. Mason turned to Scarlett, shocked. She smiled calmly. I'm not leaving the company. I'm stepping down to COO. Gerald will return as CEO until we find the right replacement. But why? Someone demanded. Because I've been working 80-hour weeks for 7 years, and I just realized I don't want to anymore. I want time for a life outside this boardroom. I want to leave at 6 p.m. and not feel guilty about it. I want to figure out who I am when I'm not being the youngest CEO in the industry. She glanced at Mason. Someone recently taught me that success looks different for different people. This is what it looks like for me. Richard Chen actually laughed. This is insane. You're throwing away your career for what? Work-life balance. That's a myth. It's only a myth if you keep treating it like one, Scarlett replied. I'm 30 years old. I've built a billion-dollar company, and I'm tired, so I'm choosing differently. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave now. No one left. The meeting continued, but Mason barely tracked it. At 2:45, he stood to leave. This time, Scarlett stood with him. I'm done too, she said. My first act is COO. I'm implementing mandatory leave-by times for all executives. No more 80-hour weeks. We either learn to work efficiently, or we hire more people. Gerald smiled. Seconded. All in favor? The vote was unanimous. Outside in the elevator, Mason turned to Scarlett. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. For me. For everyone working themselves to death because they think that's what success requires. She took his hand. And maybe a little bit for you, so I can have Friday dinners without checking my phone every 10 minutes. The elevator opened on the lobby level. Ellie was waiting there. Mrs. Chen had brought her early because school had half day. Dad! Scarlett! She ran to them. Mrs. Chen said I could come visit. Hey, sweetheart. Mason scooped her up. How was school? Good. We learned about percentages. Did you know that 50% is half? I did know that. Oh. She thought about it. Well, I just learned it. Scarlett laughed, and something in Mason's chest settled. This was it. This was the life he'd fought for. Messy and imperfect and absolutely right. They walked out together into the December afternoon, and for the first time in 7 years, Mason felt like maybe the grief could coexist with joy. That Sarah's memory didn't mean he couldn't love again. That choosing Ellie first didn't mean there was no room for anything else. That evening, after Ellie finally went to sleep following an elaborate bedtime story about dinosaurs who became astronauts, Mason and Scarlett sat on the balcony wrapped in blankets against the cold. I'm scared, Scarlett admitted. What if I'm terrible at this? What if I can't balance both? You will be terrible at it sometimes. So will I. That's how it works. Very reassuring. I'm serious. There's no perfect balance. Some days work wins, some days family wins. The goal isn't perfection, it's being present for what matters when it matters. And what matters right now? Mason kissed her, slow and gentle, tasting coffee and possibility. When they pulled apart, Scarlett was smiling. That, he said, that matters right now. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in May, Mason and Ellie stood in the kitchen making pancakes while Scarlett read the newspaper at the table. It had become their routine. Weekends together, the three of them, building something that looked like family. Ellie had accepted Scarlett's presence with the adaptability of children. Is Scarlett your girlfriend? She'd asked one night. Yeah, is that okay? I guess. She knows a lot about fish. That had been the extent of the conversation. In Ellie's world, knowledge of marine biology was apparently sufficient qualification for dating her father. "Dad, you're burning them," Ellie said now, pointing at the griddle. "Paying attention." Mason flipped the pancakes, only slightly darker than intended. Scarlett looked up from the paper. "There's an article here about work-life balance in tech companies. It mentions Orion Grid's new policies as a model. Are you in it?" "Briefly. They quote me saying something about productivity increasing when people aren't exhausted." She set the paper down. "It's strange. I spent years chasing headlines about our growth and success. Now the headline is about us working less. And I'm happier than I've ever been." She stood, moving to wrap her arms around Mason from behind while he finished the pancakes. "Who knew?" Ellie made a face. "You guys are being mushy again." "We're making pancakes," Mason protested. "Mushy pancakes." After breakfast, they walked to the park. Ellie ran ahead to the playground while Mason and Scarlett followed slowly, hands linked. "I've been thinking," Scarlett said, "about the future." "Yeah? I want to be part of this. Officially. You and Ellie." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "I know it's complicated. I know I'm not Sarah, and I'm not trying to be. But I love you, both of you. And I want to build something real." Mason felt his throat tighten. "Scarlett, you don't have to answer now. I just needed to say it." "I love you too." The words came easier than he expected. "And Ellie loves you. But I need you to understand, she comes first, always. That won't change." "I know. I wouldn't want it to." Scarlett smiled. "That's actually what I love about you. You know what matters." They kissed, there in the middle of the park path, while Ellie shouted from the swings for them to watch her go higher. That night, after Ellie went to bed, Mason pulled out the small box he'd been hiding for 2 weeks. Inside was a simple ring, nothing extravagant, just a silver band with a small diamond. He'd bought it on impulse, walking past a jewelry store, stopping when something in the window caught his eye. The salesperson had tried to upsell him to something bigger, flashier, but Mason had known immediately this was right. Simple, honest, real. He found Scarlett on the balcony, staring at the city lights. "Hey," he said. "Hey yourself. I need to ask you something." She turned, saw the box in his hand, and her eyes went wide. "Mason, let me say this before I lose my nerve." He opened the box. 7 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered, and all I could do was survive for Ellie's sake. But you showed me something different. You showed me that life doesn't end when you think it does, that there's room for new joy even when the old grief stays with you. Tears were streaming down Scarlett's face. "I love you," Mason continued. "I love how you listen to Ellie's dinosaur facts like they're the most important thing in the world. I love how you learned to make grilled cheese cut diagonally because that's how she likes it. I love that you walked away from being CEO because you wanted a life more than a title." He took a shaky breath. "Will you marry me?" Scarlett was nodding before he finished the question. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and she pulled him into a kiss that tasted like tears and laughter and everything good that survived grief. "I need to ask Ellie," Scarlett said when they pulled apart. "Make sure she's okay with this." "She already knows." "What?" "She helped me pick out the ring, told the salesperson that her dad needed something pretty but not too sparkly because that would be showing off." Scarlett laughed through her tears. "She said that? She's very wise for 7. They sat together on the balcony, Scarlett's hand in his, the ring catching light from the city below. Mason thought about Sarah, about the life they'd built and lost, about how love doesn't replace love. It just adds to it, makes room for more. Sarah would have liked Scarlett, would have appreciated her intelligence, her determination, her willingness to choose differently when she realized she'd been building the wrong thing. The wedding was small, held in the park where they'd first admitted they loved each other. Ellie served as flower girl and ring bearer, taking both jobs very seriously. She wore the blue dress with stars, Sarah's last gift, and carried a bouquet of flowers she'd helped choose. Frank gave Mason away because sometimes family is the people who show up consistently rather than the ones you're related to. Gerald Moss attended, along with a handful of board members who'd learned to respect boundaries. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. But the moment Mason would remember forever was after, when they were taking photos and Ellie tugged on Scarlett's dress. "Can I call you Mom?" she asked, her voice small. "Not to replace my real mom, but because you're here now, and you take care of us, and you know about fish." Scarlett knelt down, makeup already smudged from crying. "I would be honored. And Ellie, your real mom will always be your mom. I'm just additional. Bonus mom." "I like that, bonus mom." Ellie hugged her. "You're my bonus mom who knows about fish, the best kind of bonus mom." Mason watched them embrace and felt the last piece of his broken heart seal over. Not healed, the scar would always be there, but sealed enough to hold new love without leaking out all the old grief. That evening, the three of them stood on the balcony of their new apartment, bigger than Mason's old place, with room for all of them. Ellie had fallen asleep against Scarlett's shoulder, exhausted from the excitement. "We should put her to bed," Scarlett whispered. "One more minute." They stood there, the three of them, watching the city lights blur into stars. Mason thought about the journey that had brought him here, the loss that had broken him, the choice to rebuild differently, the unexpected love that had found him when he'd stopped looking. Success, he'd learned, wasn't about building empires or accumulating wealth or achieving titles. Success was this: standing on a balcony with the people you loved, knowing that whatever came next, you'd face it together. It was Friday dinners and homework help and aquarium trips. It was showing up when it mattered, being present for the moments that counted. It was choosing people over profit, family over fame, love over loneliness. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely real. And for Mason Reed, former founder, current consultant, full-time father, and now husband, it was everything. Ellie stirred against Scarlett's shoulder. "Dad?" she mumbled sleepily. "Are we a family now?" "We've always been a family, baby. Now we're just a bigger one." "I like bigger." "Me too." "Can we still have pancakes tomorrow?" "We can definitely have pancakes tomorrow." "Good." She settled back to sleep. "Love you, Dad. Love you, bonus mom." "Love you too, sweetheart," they said together. And in that moment, standing between the daughter he'd raised alone and the woman who'd learned to build a different kind of life, Mason finally understood something Sarah had tried to tell him in those last days. Love doesn't end. It just changes form, multiplies, becomes something new while still honoring what came before. You don't move on from loss. You move forward with it, carrying it alongside new joy, learning that the heart is bigger than anyone thinks. Big enough for grief and happiness, memory and hope. Yesterday's love and tomorrow's promise. Big enough for everything that matters. The city hummed below them, indifferent and eternal. And on one small balcony, a family stood together, imperfect, scarred, healing, whole. Exactly as they should be.